Chapter 378. Do you really only want to chase the yellow bandits out of Guangdong? If one day other places do the same, won't they come back to Guangdong? When that time comes, what should we do? Yang Chendong suddenly raised his head. His gaze was as sharp as a sword as he looked at Ma Wei and asked. Ma Wei panicked when he was asked this question. Just as he did not know how to answer, Yang Chendong's gaze turned and landed on Guaning. General Ma is the commander of the Guangdong Guards. It is understandable that you only have Guangdong in your eyes, but General Guan is the vice-director of the Southern Ming Ministry of War. You should have the bigger picture in your eyes. Are you also so short-sighted? Guan Ying's expression froze. He quickly lowered his head and said with an embarrassed expression, "Sir, I was wrong. I was wrong as well." Ma Wei saw that Guaning from the Ministry of War was reprimanded. How could he continue to be stubborn? He quickly lowered his head as if admitting his mistake. Seeing that the two had admitted their mistakes, Yang Chendong's expression relaxed. Forget it. I was entrusted by the Emperor and had to consider the long term. If we only chase the yellow bandits out of Guangdong, it does not count as completing the mission. That is why I said what I said just now. If it was too serious, I ask for your understanding. Yang Chendong's words slowed down and there was a hint of self-blame. Immediately, Ma Wei and Guan Ying's expressions became uneasy. Sir, what are you saying? You have great insight and thought things through. We can learn from you. Everyone liked to hear flattery. Yang Chendong's expression also became much better. Good, since the two generals have the same opinion, then let's see how we can get rid of the yellow bandits once and for all. As he spoke, Yang Chendong walked in front of the sand table in the tent. The sand table was a military sand table. It had already appeared in the Ming Dynasty, but its name was Kanyu Map. It was said that the martial great master Zhu Hozhao loved to play with sand tables. The sand table had already marked out the areas where the yellow bandits were active. Yellow flags were placed on top. The surrounding southern Ming troops had black flags in their hands. Come and take a look. After the defeat at the prefecture of Guangzhou, Huang Yuliang retreated to the Zhaoqing prefecture with his remaining troops and is resting there. To the north of Wuzhou, there was a ridge known as Mengzhu Ridge. Once one left from here, one could enter Guizhou and Huguang. In order to prevent the chaos of the yellow bandits from spreading everywhere, this imperial envoy has already arranged for Pingle Prefecture's General He Sheng and 2 battalions of the mercenary army to defend that place, making it impossible for them to leave. Then, to the south of Xuanzhou Prefecture, Gaozhou is extremely close to Laizhou. If things go south, the yellow bandits can also pass through here to reach Shanghai. In order to prevent this imperial envoy has also arranged for Ganzhou Prefecture's General Yu Ping and 2 battalions of the mercenary army to defend that place, cutting off their path of retreat. When Yang Chendong said this, Guaning and Ma Wei had a look of sudden realization. Previously, Hao Sheng and General Yu Guang had suddenly disappeared without a trace. They had guessed that they had received the imperial envoy's military orders, but no one had been able to guess what they had done. Looking at it now, they knew that Yang Chendong had long made plans and arrangements. Thus, the defeat of the yellow bandits in front of the Canton prefecture should have been within his expectations. Thinking about how he had even calculated the future situation and made preparations, at the same time the two of them sighed in admiration, they acknowledged the title of the god of war even more. Yang Chendong did not look at their expressions. It was as if he did not care about their thoughts. Instead, he continued, thus, if the yellow bandits want to establish themselves, other than fighting us head-on, they can only choose to retreat to Guangxi. General Guan, you are an official of the Ministry of War. Please immediately inform the Guangxi guards to guard the front line between Nanning Prefecture and Liuzhou Prefecture. No matter what, they cannot give the yellow bandits an opportunity. Of course, if they do not have the ability to guard it, then being affected by the bandits will have nothing to do with us. I will give them 7 days to prepare. After 7 days, the troops will march to Wuzhou Prefecture and completely take care of the Huang bandits. A palm landed on the sand table. Yang Chendong spoke with a determined expression. It was clear that he had already made up his mind. Yes. Guaning and Ma Wei both sighed in admiration as they spoke. At this moment, they finally understood that this imperial envoy was not doing nothing. On the contrary, he had thought of everything. He was particular about planning before acting. In terms of ability, he was much stronger than them. Guaning sent people to send a message to the Guangxi army. Ma Wei also began to gather more food for the army. After seeing the power of the mercenaries, they did not dare to be the slightest bit negligent in terms of food. The Yang family army was able to have better food. Every day, they ate until they were full and rested well. The morale of the army was greatly boosted. Even the 2,000 temporary auxiliary soldiers blended into this positive atmosphere. Some people were already planning in their hearts that if there was a big battle, they would perform well and strive to remove the word temporary from their heads. Zhaoqing Manor. The original yamen became Huang Yuliang's place to rest and work. Because of the defeat of the Guang province soldiers, although there were still many yellow bandits in Zhaoqing Manor, the entire atmosphere had become much lower. The morale of the soldiers was low. As the main commander, Huang Yuliang, of course, was anxious. He called for Zhu Fangyong, who had saved his life outside the Guang province city. Outside the Guang province city, if Zhu Fangyong had not acted decisively, Huang Yuliang would not have been able to escape. Thinking about how General Geng Jun had been so brave and good at fighting but had still died in front of the battlefield, he felt waves of fear. It was because Zhu Fangyong had saved his life that he relied heavily on this person. Since Huang Yuliang liked Zhu Fangyong so much, it was hard for the people below to not be jealous. Someone asked why things were so coincidental. They had just wanted to use the arrival of the reinforcements to lure Ma Wei out of the city when the reinforcements actually arrived. Was there some connection? Some people even doubted Zhu Fangyong's loyalty. After all, this person had only joined the Yellow Bandits for a short time. In the face of these rumors, Zhu Fangyong actually admitted to it. He said that all of this was the blessings of the heavens. It was all thanks to this plan. Otherwise, if they were caught off guard, would the Southern Ming Empire's reinforcements not come? If that really happened, the losses would be even greater. However, the scouts were so useless that they did not even give a warning when the Southern Ming Empire's reinforcements arrived. They had truly missed the opportunity. When Zhu Fangyong's words reached Huang Yuliang's ears, not only did he not doubt this person, but he also thought that this was a blessing from the heavens. While praising him and making him his trusted aide, he also killed the scout to improve the morale of the troops. After Zhu Fangyong became Huang Yuliang's trusted aide, he naturally became an important guest. He was often called over to eat together and at the same time, analyze the current situation. General Zhu, we have already been in Zhaoqing Manor for a period of time. We have also gathered many scattered soldiers, but I don't know why the Southern Ming Empire's army did not take this opportunity to attack us. What are they planning to do? Huang Yuliang's face was filled with worry. The Southern Ming Empire's reinforcements were truly too powerful. They were so powerful that he felt a bone-deep fear. Young master, there is no need to worry. There must be a reason why the Southern Ming Empire's reinforcements did not come. From this general's point of view, it should be because their own military strength is insufficient. This general has sent people to inquire about some news. I heard that the Southern Ming Empire's reinforcements have actually recruited some of our brothers as soldiers. It seems that they are really desperate. Zhu Fangyong said with a smile, but he was truly worried. He thought about the information he had received from the Security Bureau 2 days ago. It said that the 6th young master wanted him to keep Huang Yuliang in Zhaoqing no matter what and wait for him to bring his troops over to carry out his previous plan. He also said that the Yang family's army was too small. If they wanted to achieve anything, they had to expand their army and accept many yellow bandits as soldiers. He was truly shocked. As for keeping Huang Yuliang in Zhaoqing City, Zhu Fangyong felt that it was not difficult to do. This was because this young master Huang did not want to admit defeat and wanted to rise again. How could he leave so easily? It was not easy to get to Zhaoqing City. However, as for the matter of recruiting yellow bandits as soldiers, he was truly worried. Zhu Fangyong, who had stayed in the yellow bandits' army for a period of time, knew that they were just a bunch of villagers who had no choice but to join the army to fill their stomachs. They did not have any culture and did not understand any great principles. They would only follow whoever gave them food. Would these people be loyal? Would these people be of any use on the battlefield? He did not want to drag down other allies. Although he was worried, this was something the sixth young master would do. Due to his respect and reliance on the sixth young master, he did not say anything in the end. He was currently in Zhaoqing City and could not care about things that were too far away. It was better to complete the mission first. Huang Yuliang was originally raising a cup of strong wine to his mouth when he heard Zhu Fangyong's words. When he heard that his subordinates had been recruited by the Southern Ming, he was first stunned and then laughed. His originally nervous expression instantly relaxed. Ha ha ha, the Southern Ming actually recruited our soldiers. Is this true? I sent out 3 groups of people and the news they sent back was the same. It should not be false, Zhu Fangyong replied with a serious expression. Good, good. Huang Yuliang stood up with a face full of joy. The Southern Ming actually used our soldiers as soldiers. This shows that they have too few soldiers. More importantly, they do not know that the people who can join my volunteer army are all warriors who have lost faith in the Southern Ming. If they lose on the battlefield, in order to survive, they will have to surrender to save their lives. However, their hearts will still be on our side. If we use these people, once the two sides fight and we have the upper hand, they will very likely turn their spearhead on the battlefield. That will be the time they reap what they sow, ha ha ha. Chapter 379. The laughing Huang Yuliang finally relaxed. Even the captives had to be reorganized. It seemed that the Southern Ming army was really weak. Facing such an opponent, so what if they lost once? Compared to Huang Yuliang's mocking laughter, Zhu Qizhen was laughing to his heart's content in the Southern Ming capital, Nanjing. At the same time, in the political affairs hall, Zhu Qizhen looked at the 6 ministers and several other important officials with a smile on his face. Come, everyone take a look. This is the report of victory that we just received. The Guangzhou government was victorious. More than 10,000 enemy leaders were killed and nearly 30,000 people were captured. We have greatly damaged the arrogance of the yellow bandits. The report of the battle had just been received. At this moment, Zhu Qizhen's mood was very good. In the past few days, his expression, which had been troubled by the situation in Yunnan, was much more relaxed. The report of victory was quickly read by several important officials. The officials immediately knelt on the ground and said loudly, "Your Majesty is blessed by the heavens. Congratulations, long live your Majesty." That's right. The heavens have indeed treated me well. Beloved official Lu, immediately prepare to worship the heavens. I want to announce it to the world. Since ancient times, the imperial family liked to seek good luck. How could Zhu Qizhen let go of the opportunity to show off his wise and powerful status? Yes, your Majesty. Lu De stood in position and complied. However, he did not immediately go to work after answering. First, he had a thoughtful expression. Then, he raised his head and slowly said, "Your Majesty, this official does not understand military affairs. However, from reading, I know the principle of pursuing the enemy. Why is it that the Guangzhou government has clearly defeated the yellow bandits, but did not pursue the enemy?" Following Lu De's words, Zhu Qizhen, who was sitting on the dragon throne, had a serious expression on his face. This scene was clearly seen by the Minister of War, Kuang Yi. Immediately, he held his ceremonial tablet and walked out. Minister Liu, Minister Counselor Yan Ying has already reported back. He said that the Ming army and the mercenaries were already very tired. In addition, we did not have enough troops, so we did not pursue. On this point, this official agrees with this action. So it is like this. This official has worried too much. Seeing that Zhu Qizhen's expression had turned ugly, Lu De knew that he had achieved his goal. He knew when to stop and stood back. Your Majesty, Duke of Loyalty and Courage's command this time was successful. Guaning and the others cooperated well. This subject thinks that we should reward them and encourage them so that they can go all out and be driven by us. Kuang Yi had no intention of chasing after Lu De. Since he had already stood up, he naturally had to ask for credit for the soldiers on the front lines. This was also his duty as the Minister of War. When Kuang Yi mentioned the reward, Zhu Qizhen nodded. Issue an edict. Guaning will be conferred the title of Director of the Ministry of War. All other meritorious service personnel will be promoted by 1 rank and rewarded between 1,000 and 100 taels of silver. As for the Duke of Loyalty, his name is borrowed from Baiming. If you want to reward him, you need to inform them. Let's leave it to the Ministry of Rights. Yes. Lu De, who had just retreated, stood up again and respectfully answered. However, anyone could see that if this matter was left to this person to handle, it was unknown when a reply would come. It was even possible that there would never be a reply. Kuang Yi also wanted to say something on behalf of Yang Chendong. In the secret letter that Guaning had given him, it was clear that without the imperial envoy, it would have been difficult to win this battle. How could such a talent be neglected or offended? However, before he could say anything, Zhu Qizhen had already stood up and said, "You can all disperse. We are tired and need to rest for a while. If there are no important matters, do not disturb us." After saying this, he seemed to stare at Kuang Yi as if these words were only for him to hear. Speaking of which, Zhu Qizhen both loved and feared Yang Chendong. He loved him because this person was indeed talented and had once saved his life. It was not an exaggeration to say that he was his benefactor. He was afraid that it was because Yang Chendong was too powerful. In the Guangdong matter, the southern Ming army had always been at a disadvantage. However, he had won a great battle as soon as he arrived. This kind of result naturally made people happy, but at the same time, it made people worried. This person was so good at fighting to the outside world. If one day, he had some thoughts that he should not have, then who could keep him in check? Since ancient times, what emperors liked to play with the most was the art of balance. Pulling one side to fight another, pulling the weak to fight the strong, to maintain the balance of the court. This way, he, as the emperor, was even more important. However, looking at it now, Yang Chendong's power was probably unrivaled. This kind of person had to be used, but it had to be guarded. This time, he did not reward the other party. Of course, to the outside world, it was because he was the official of the Baiming. There were some things that had to be considered when it came to him. The court dispersed. The important officials left the political affairs hall one by one. Only Kuang Yi was still standing there in a daze, as if he had lost his soul. Minister Feng. A voice sounded beside him, calling Kuang Yi's wandering soul back. When he turned his head and saw the person, he forced a smile. So it's Minister Wang. The person who came was Wang Zhua. He was also one of the 9 important officials that Yang Chendong saved during the Battle of Tumu. At this time, when he saw Kuang Yi's lifeless eyes, he had already guessed what the other party was thinking. He shook his head and persuaded, "Minister Feng, you don't need to think too much. We have been officials for many years, how can we not know the emperor's thoughts? Even that Duke of Loyalty and Courage should be very clear. Moreover, he shouldn't mind too much." "He won't mind?" Kuang Yi asked, not quite understanding. Why would he mind? For him, the Duke of Loyalty and Courage is already an extremely high honor. He is only 21 years old. In history, there are very few people who can do this. As the saying goes, it's lonely at the top. Wang's lips moved slightly, speaking slowly. Then he cupped his fists and said, the Duke of Loyalty and Courage is a smart person. This kind of person is very opinionated and will endure humiliation. Otherwise, he would not have such achievements. Besides, since this is the Emperor's intention, we as officials are powerless to change it. We only need to speak the truth. As for what kind of situation will occur, we can only wait and see. Wang's looked like he saw it very clearly. This was also because he was the Minister of Revenue. Originally, he dealt with money. It could be said that he always calculated the accounts very clearly. Because of fear, Ing Zong found a reason not to reward Yang Chendong. This was originally the Emperor's power. But he did forget one thing. That was, this time he was facing Yang Chendong. Was he such a good person? It was said that in Baiming, because the Minister of Justice, Yu Shiyue, offended him, he was overthrown. Even Dai Zong could not protect him. How could such a person not fight back after being schemed against? Just wait and see. If this goes on, Zhu Qizhen is likely to suffer the consequences of his own actions. Because Wang's saw through everything, he knew that this was a battle between two tigers. Bystanders could not persuade, so he did not say anything. At this time, he told Kuang Yi all of this. This oldest minister of war quickly understood. He sighed and said, this old man is old. I'm afraid I won't be able to serve the emperor for long. Yes, since you don't have enough energy, it's better to take a good rest. Wang's chuckled. His hint was effective. Since he could not solve any problem by speaking, it was better to not say anything and just watch. The so-called old meant that his energy was limited. It meant that Kuang Yi would not say anything more on this matter. The two important officials spoke and then left the political affairs hall after everyone else. They were thinking about what kind of expression the front line would have after receiving the imperial edict. A few days later, it was the last day for the Ming army to rest. According to the plan, the army would leave the Guang province house the next morning and head toward Zhaoqing House, which was heavily guarded by the yellow bandits. Food and equipment were all prepared. With the cooperation of Administrator Liu Youfu, Commander Ma Wei, and Guan Ning, all of the work was done. When the time came, the army would set off. Compared to the last time, the number of troops was much higher. For the Ming army, Ma Wei and Guan Ning led 4,000 soldiers. For the mercenaries, there were 4 companies of Lingfeng, 8 companies of support soldiers, 8 companies of support soldiers, and 2,000 temporary support soldiers. In total, there were 3,200 people. On the surface, it did not seem like a lot. It was about the size of a normal garrison. However, in reality, the morale of this army was very high. Especially their combat strength, even if there were several times more troops, they would not be a match for them. On this point, Ma Wei and Guan Ning were very confident. They were looking forward to doing something new. It was also at this time that the eunuch who announced Emperor Ingzong's edict came. The moment he appeared, he asked all of the generals above the rank of Chiliarch to enter the tent. Ma Wei, Guan Ning, and the others naturally rushed over. However, when the news reached Yang Chendong in another tent, he was playing 5-in-a-row chess with his wife, Hu Yan, and they looked like they were in the midst of a battle. The tent door opened from the outside and Tiger's Mane walked in. "Young master, the eunuch that Emperor Ingzong sent has arrived. He is now meeting with the Ming army general." "Oh. He is not slow." Yang Chendong answered absent-mindedly. Then he looked up at Hu Yan and said, "Yener, it is your turn to go. Watch carefully, or else I will win." Lu Lang. Seeing that Yang Chendong was not moved and had no intention of meeting with the eunuch, Hu Yan said worriedly. When he saw Hu Yan's worried expression, Yang Chendong said with a relaxed face. It's okay, it's okay. Husband has his own plans. If I am not wrong, it should have nothing to do with me. Since that is the case, why should I join in the fun? We will be on the road tomorrow. It is better to take advantage of the time to relax. Come, let's continue. Oh. Since her husband said that nothing would happen, Hu Yan completely believed that nothing would happen. She immediately agreed and began to think about how to write the next sentence. Tiger's mane only came to deliver the news. Since the young master knew, his task was completed. He then left the tent and it seemed to be quiet again. Chapter 380. In contrast, the large tent not far away was particularly lively. When the eunuch announced the emperor's decree, if everyone was not rewarded with silver taels, they were rewarded with military exploits, and they were promoted. Which one of them was not in high spirits? Even Ma Wei, because of his meritorious service, had offset the crime of losing his territory. General Ma, Dr. Guan, why don't I see the imperial envoy? The eunuch who was in charge of announcing the edict spoke with a hint of dissatisfaction when he did not see Yang Chendong appear after he had finished what he was supposed to say. The position of eunuchs in the Ming dynasty was not low. In history, many eunuchs with power came from this dynasty. To be able to become an edict-announcing eunuch, which one of them did not have the trust of the emperor? Outside officials did not dare to offend such a person. As for his question, the two of them had to answer. After they looked at each other with great tacit understanding, Guaning took the initiative to stand out and say, replying to eunuch, the Duke of Loyalty is not in the camp. He must have gone out to patrol. You also know that as the commander of the army, it is normal to have more worries. Oh, that is a pity. I wanted to admire the Duke of Loyalty's elegance. Since this is not a coincidence, we will meet again if we have the chance. The edict-announcing eunuch's face was filled with disappointment. He did not know that his words, in the eyes of Ma Wei and Guaning, were no different from missing out on life and death. Thinking back to the time when Yang Chendong killed Jiaping and punished Han Qing, how swift was that? It also showed that this person was not to be trifled with. This time, he rewarded everyone, but did not mention Yang Chendong. With his temper, who knew what he would do? At this time, this eunuch was still thinking of going to see the imperial envoy. If he did not do well, he might be kicked out in a fit of anger. If that was not a brush with death, what was it? After the edict-announcing eunuch received some benefits and silver from Ma Wei, Guaning, and the others, he left with a smile on his face. The two generals were left with bitter expressions on their faces. In the battle outside of Guangzhou Prefecture City, the two of them should be very clear about who should have the greatest merit. However, this time, the emperor had given out rewards other than the greatest merit. In this way, wouldn't they feel ashamed to accept it? Of course, the most important thing was that they were leaving for Wuzhou tomorrow. At this moment, would the imperial envoy be angry? Would the plan change? The two of them really wanted to go to Yang Chendong's tent to find out what was going on, but they were also worried that if they really went there, they would run into bad luck. In the end, they came up with a solution, which was to use the excuse that the rich gentry in the Guangzhou government wanted to hold a farewell party for the army to test Yang Chendong's agreement. With the decision made, the two of them entered the city and found the Guangdong provincial commissioner, Lu Youfu, and briefly explained the situation. Lord Lu, I'll have to trouble you with this matter. After all, you are the Guangdong provincial commissioner. This time, the emperor only rewarded military generals and not civil officials. It looks like it has nothing to do with you. Presumably, if you go now, even if the imperial envoy is a bit angry, he won't come for you. Ma Wei said with a forced smile. Yes, from what I see, Lord Lu is indeed the most suitable person. After all, the rich gentry wants to hold a farewell party for the army. This is the matter of the local officials. Guaning added on. At this moment, Liu Youfu knew that he had been sold. However, when he thought about how this battle was for the peace of Guangdong, only after it was done well could his position as the provincial commissioner be considered legitimate. Even if it was for himself, he had to do something. Alright, I'll go take a look. However, remember, you owe me a good meal of wine. Of course, this was a joke. With Liu Youfu saying this, Ma Wei and Guaning nodded their heads in agreement. Then, they watched Lord Liu enter the imperial envoy's tent. He went in quickly, and came back even faster. When Liu Youfu came out, he shook his head as he walked. This scene fell into the eyes of Ma Wei and Guaning and could be said to be endlessly worried. When he came closer, the two of them went up and asked, "How is Lord Liu? Did the imperial envoy change the plan?" "Ah, the plan hasn't changed. The imperial envoy said that everything is as usual." Liu Youfu shook his head and said the result. Hearing that there were no changes, Ma Wei and Guan Ying's faces relaxed. However, they then asked in confusion, "Liu Dio, if everything is as usual, why did you act like that just now? What is the meaning of this?" "This. It's just that when I saw the imperial envoy's expression was as usual and his reply was also quick, I thought that the reward this time was indeed a bit unfair," Liu Youfu said with a sigh. When he saw Yang Chendong just now, the other party was still the same as before, as if the eunuch who announced the decree had never appeared. This kind of calmness, this kind of ease, and even this kind of broad-mindedness could not help but be admired. At least, if it were him, he probably would not have such a calm expression. Only then did Liu Youfu express his feelings. However, when these words were spoken, the three of them did not speak anymore. After all, the eunuch who announced the decree was under the emperor's orders. As officials, they did not have the courage to talk about the emperor in private. Fortunately, the plan was as usual, so they could go back and have a good night's sleep. In the military tent not far away, Yang Chendong was thinking about something with his eyes closed. Hu Yan had already left to prepare dinner, leaving only Tiger's Mane and Beta Persei here. "Young master? Are you not angry?" Seeing that there were no outsiders, Tiger's Mane finally could not help but ask. "That's right, I also want to ask this." To the side, Beta Persei lowered his voice. This was not because he was talking about a secret, but because his voice was like thunder. When he spoke normally, it would sometimes scare Yang Chendong, which was why he was forbidden to lower his pitch when he spoke in the future. The two taciturn people beside them, who usually did not ask themselves and rarely spoke, had actually spoken on this matter. Yang Chendong's originally closed eyes slowly opened. He then looked at the two of them with interest and said, "What? You're fighting for justice on behalf of the young master?" "Young master, it's not fighting for justice, it's the truth. Why are those people who did not do anything great rewarded, but you don't have anything?" Seeing that Yang Chendong was not angry, Tiger's Mane became much bolder when he spoke. "Ha, ha, well said, it's the truth." Yang Chendong nodded, seeming to agree with Tiger's Mane's statement, but then shook his head. "But what does the truth matter? When others must turn a blind eye to it, the truth can also be treated as if it doesn't exist. At the end of the day, everything depends on strength." After Yang Chendong said this, he looked at Tiger's Mane and Beta Persei and said in a teaching tone, "Remember, benefits are not something that you want, but should be fought for with practical actions. Only when you become strong, no one will dare to give you a hard time, and all kinds of unfairness will leave you. On the contrary, before that, even if you have any dissatisfaction, you need to endure it. Otherwise, even if you have great talent, I'm afraid you won't have the chance to show it, understand?" These words were somewhat profound. But the two of them had been with Yang Chendong for more than a day or two. Even if they didn't understand the whole thing, they understood the gist of it. Young master's words were nothing more than that, they were not strong enough now, and they still needed to work hard to develop. Only when they developed and became stronger, such unfair things would not happen again. Yes, young master, we understand. We will work harder in the future. Tiger's Mane and Beta Persei both said with a solemn expression. Very good. Seeing that the other party understood what he meant, Yang Chendong first smiled, then closed his mouth again. He was thinking about the problem of how Yangtze's population could grow rapidly. In the end, the development of Yangtze was still too short, and the foundation was too weak. For example, the problem of population alone was enough to stop all of his development paths. Just this morning, they received news from Resin City that the fleet sent out to search for rubber trees had returned, bringing back over 100 ships of rubber trees that could be transplanted. This great news was enough to prove that electricity could finally be put to use in Resin City. But even so, Yang Chendong couldn't help but feel a little melancholy while feeling gratified. Now that he had the territory, if he didn't have enough population and army to support it, then it would still be a big problem. Before the real expansion began, how to get more people to Qiqian City without outsiders knowing was the most important problem. Population. Thinking about this, Yang Chendong's mind quickly formed plans. The next morning, more than 7,000 allied troops set off from Guangzhou. Their target was Zhaoqing. As the Guangdong political envoy, Liu Youfu did not follow them. Instead, he sent the army off at the city gates. He was looking forward to this army thoroughly defeating or even eliminating the Huang bandit army, allowing him to become the true Guangdong political envoy. The moment the army moved out, the scouts sent by the Huang bandits spread the news and headed straight for Zhaoqing Prefecture, which was several hundred li away. Huang Yuliang, who was in Zhaoqing, had already listened to Zhu Fangyong's suggestion and retreated to Wuzhou. At this moment, there were about 40,000 troops gathered in Wuzhou. Most of them were defeated soldiers outside of Guangzhou. After these days, the people who had fled from the defeat had all returned to Wuzhou. They wanted to make a comeback. Or it could be said that they didn't have much of a choice. The surrounding cities were all destroyed when they rebelled. With no one to plant the fertile land, how could they reap any harvest in autumn? Without food, surviving would be a problem. At least when they came to the Wuzhou prefecture, they would have food to eat. Although it was not a war and they only had 2 meals of porridge a day, as long as they did not starve to death and fainted, there was still hope, right? Chapter 381. For the sake of food and survival, there would be many people entering the Wuzhou prefecture every day under the banner of the Revolutionary Army. The bandit leader, Huang Yuliang, was overjoyed when he saw all of this. Regardless of the reason, these people were willing to seek refuge with him. At least he had made a name for himself. With a name, there would be people. With people, he could go around killing and pillaging. Food and money would flow into his hands endlessly. With this cycle, his territory would grow bigger and bigger, and his military strength would also grow. One day, it would not be impossible for him to ascend the throne and become an emperor. In order to achieve these goals, the first thing he had to do was to deal with the invaders. The news had already been sent over. When he learned that the Southern Ming Empire had sent over 7,000 soldiers to Zhaoqing Prefecture, Huang Yuliang laughed heartily. Only 7,000 people and they dare to go against my army of 40,000? Do they really not want to live anymore? Huang Yuliang's laughter traveled to the various leaders in the tent. Naturally, everyone laughed along with him. In their eyes, these people were also not optimistic about the 7,000 Southern Ming Empire troops. At this moment, they seemed to have forgotten about their defeat outside the prefecture of Guangzhou. Of course, there were too many reasons why they had failed. For example, the other party had ambushed them and caught them off guard. However, now that they were prepared, they didn't believe that these 7,000 people would be able to turn into monsters. Young master, the Southern Ming Empire only sent over 7,000 people. I think they might not even be able to reach the Wuzhou prefecture. Zhaoqing Prefecture's General Cheng should be able to defeat them. One of the leaders saw that Huang Yuliang was in a good mood and hurriedly flattered him. The so-called General Cheng was one of the leaders of the Huang bandit army, Cheng Yuan. Cheng Yuan had some military talent. However, because he was slightly less experienced than Geng Jun and the other three, he did not enter the ranks of the four heavenly kings. However, following Geng Jun's death, there were now calls for him to be a substitute and become one of the four heavenly kings. With such ability and charisma, Huang Yuliang sent 5,000 of his men to Zhaoqing Prefecture to test him. They were there to stop the southern Ming Empire's army. The art of war said that once, twice, thrice, and thrice, one would be exhausted. What was important was that if they couldn't work together in battle, the morale of the army would drop and the morale would be shaken. Naturally, their combat strength would be greatly reduced. Cheng Yuan and 5,000 troops were left behind in Zhaoqing Manor to achieve this goal. Of course, it would be best if he could win. It would be hard for Huang Bandit General to find any opponents in Guangdong. On the other hand, even if they lost, they would heavily injure their opponent and make ample preparations for the upcoming battle in Wuzhou. Not bad. Hearing someone mention Cheng Yuan, Huang Yuliang said excitedly, "This young master has already promised Cheng Yuan that as long as he can deal a heavy blow to the southern Ming army, he will be allowed to enter the ranks of the four heavenly kings. I believe that he will not disappoint. Congratulations, young master. Congratulations on obtaining another good general." Everyone knew that since Huang Yuliang could say such words, the matter was basically settled. One by one, they began to praise him. As for how much of the praise was sincere and how much was sincere, it was up to the benevolent to see benevolence. Zhaoqing Manor. As a place that one had to pass through on their way to Wuzhou Manor, there were many Huang bandit soldiers standing on the city gate. Under the crowd was a man holding a long blade. He had a fierce expression and his eyes flashed with a bloodthirsty light. It was Cheng Yuan himself. The news that he was going to replace the dead Geng Jun as one of the four heavenly kings had long reached his ears. Recently, there were even more people around him who were fawning over him. At the beginning, he was still clear-headed. At least he knew his own worth. However, as more and more people began to praise him, he became complacent. Sometimes, even he couldn't help but believe the words of others. It was as though he was really a god that had descended from the heavens, was really brave, was really a genius at leading troops, and was really victorious in every battle. This was what people often said. False things could become true if too many people said them. Cheng Yuan, who started to become arrogant, became arrogant, frivolous, and underestimated the enemy. Even though he knew that the southern Ming reinforcements who had defeated Huang Yuliang's 80,000-strong army were coming, when he saw the southern Ming army gradually appearing from below the city gate, he still gave the order to open the city gate and attack. "Men, bring this general's warhorse over. Let's see how I'll be defeated and take the enemy general's head amidst an army of 10,000. It seemed like he had watched too many dramas. At this moment, Cheng Yuan was filled with a heroic spirit. As he shouted, he waved the blade in his hand. "General is mighty! General is mighty!" As the main general was full of vigor, the soldiers below also had their morale boosted. They all shouted loudly with a face full of excitement. Amidst the shouts, the city gate of Zhaoqing Manor opened. Cheng Yuan, who was riding a war horse and holding a blade, only left behind 2,000 soldiers to defend the city. He brought 3,000 soldiers and horses out of the city gate. Their uniforms were messy, their weapons were all different, and they did not even have a formation. The 3,000 soldiers seemed to have come out in one go and followed behind Cheng Yuan. They did not look like a disciplined army at all. "This is the Yellow Bandit Army?" Guan Yingyan, who was standing in the opposite army, looked at the incoming people and asked curiously. When he turned around, he saw the neat ranks of the Ming army, their uniform. They were the 2,000 temporary auxiliary soldiers. Right now, they were also wearing the same Mandarin duck battle jacket as the Southern Ming Army uniform. The only difference was that they had a wide red cloth tied around their arms to make the difference. This was something that couldn't be helped. An army couldn't bring too many empty uniforms with them. Even though every Leng Fong and auxiliary soldier had a set of uniforms, they couldn't possibly give them to these temporary auxiliary soldiers. Even if they wanted to, it would not be enough. It was better to let them wear the Ming Army's uniform first. After all, there were many such things in the Guangzhou Manor's military storage. Secondly, it was to differentiate them. Everything could be changed the next time they replenished their supplies. Did they want to change out of the Ming Army's uniform at that time? Good. Then they needed to perform well. Of course, this was Yang Chendong's idea. With a large warehouse in his hands, he could take out more uniforms at any time. However, he would not do so. It was not worth it to attract suspicion for no reason. Speaking of which, this was the first time Guan Yingyan had truly fought with the Yellow Bandit army. The previous battle was in the dark. By the time he arrived at the battlefield, everything had already ended. Even though he saw some dead or captured Yellow Bandit soldiers, he did not have any direct impression of them. It was not like now where he could see everything in his mind at a glance. Guan Yingyan's doubtful words were heard by the 2,000 temporary auxiliary soldiers standing beside him. Their faces turned red and feverish. It seemed to be doubt, but in reality, the words of disdain made them feel ashamed. When they thought about how they had been proud to stay in this kind of army, they felt even more ashamed. Yang Chendong felt the change in the 2,000 temporary auxiliary soldiers. He also knew that when Guan Yingyan said these words, it was not intentional. It was just his feelings. He had no intention of blaming anyone. Instead, he said to Luo Pe, the commander of the 2nd Cold Front Regiment beside him, "Commander Luo, in a moment, choose the 1st company as the main attack. Then, choose 2 companies of auxiliary soldiers and bring 2,000 temporary auxiliary soldiers. Do you have confidence in taking down Zhaoqing Manor? Please be at ease, Imperial Envoy. If we cannot take it down, we will bring our heads to you." Luo Pe, who had been instructed earlier, changed his title to Yang Chendong. Amidst a wave of impassioned words, he gave a standard military salute and turned to pick out the generals. "Imperial Envoy, do we not need to send troops? Isn't it a little too little to send only 2,000 people?" Ma Wei, who knew the mercenary army's military structure, rode forward and carefully probed. "Yes, why don't we also send 2,000 people to help?" Guan Yingyan nodded. It was obvious that he agreed with Ma Wei's words. "There's no need." Yang Chendong shook his head resolutely and did not say anything else. He only looked at Zhaoqing Manor with a half-smile. No one knew what he was thinking. Luo Pe turned around and returned to the camp to pick out the generals. When they found out that they could only bring 1 company of Cold Front Regiment and 2 companies of auxiliary soldiers, a total of 4 company commanders of Cold Front Regiment and 8 company commanders of auxiliary soldiers instantly burst into an uproar. According to them, no matter how many companies were chosen to participate in the battle, they would definitely have a share. There were only 3 places, but the 12 company commanders all wanted to fight for it. Perhaps they also understood that there were not many opportunities to perform, or perhaps they were very confident in the soldiers they led. But no matter what, only a quarter of them could go to the battlefield. The majority of them did not have such an opportunity. If they did not fight for it, they would have even less of a chance. Obey orders. Seeing that the 12 company commanders had surrounded him, Luo Pe glared and a murderous aura exuded from his body, causing those company commanders who wanted to say something to immediately shut their mouths. Obeying orders and orders was the first lesson that every soldier had to learn after becoming an auxiliary soldier. It was also something that every soldier of the Yang family army had to do. Now that Luo Pe mentioned it, the reminder was very obvious. It was also a sign that he was about to get angry. Luo Pe only said 4 words and everyone quieted down. This made him very satisfied. He then turned his gaze to the auxiliary regiment commander Lu Zhua and said, "Regiment Commander Lu, you can decide which 2 companies of auxiliary soldiers to send." "Yes," Lu Zhua replied. Although they were both regimental commanders, Luo Po was from the Cold Front Regiment while he was from the auxiliary regiment. One could imagine the difference between them. Even if he really went to the Cold Front Regiment, whether or not he could become a battalion commander would depend on luck. Chapter 382. The 2 regiment commanders worked together and quickly picked out 3 companies to fight. Together with the 2,000 temporary auxiliary soldiers, there were a total of 2,300 people ready to fight. Among the 3,300 people, the company at the forefront was the Cold Vanguard Company led by Battalion Commander Chen Bo Luopa had taken a step back this time, giving the opportunity to charge and break through the enemy lines to his battalion commander. Chen Bo's eyes shone brightly as he seized the opportunity with great difficulty. He felt as if there was an endless amount of energy in his body. When he thought about how the 6th young master was watching his performance on the battlefield behind him and his every move, he felt an inexplicable excitement all over his body. Peng Yu was in the Cold Vanguard Company. Due to his outstanding performance on the battlefield, he had been selected by the 6th young master as a member of the Cold Vanguard Company. This time, he had to perform outstandingly to repay the trust and support. Peng Yu was not the only one. The Cold Vanguard Company was also filled with energy. Since they were able to join the Cold Vanguard Company, they naturally had the right to know who the 6th young master was. Yang Qindong's appearance was like a shot of adrenaline to them, causing them to be extremely excited. The 2 auxiliary battalions were in the middle. Following behind the Cold Vanguard Company, they would be the main attackers when the battle started. After all, the weapons in their hands were crossbows that were slightly closer to the enemy. If they wanted to be effective, then they had to rush to the front of the enemy. Although there were only 200 of them, all of them were filled with confidence. It was not for any other reason, but because they believed in their comrades and the marksmanship of the Cold Vanguard Company members who would be assisting them on the battlefield. If anyone dared to counterattack or threaten their lives, the Cold Vanguard Company would definitely step in and take care of the enemy one by one. Standing at the very back were the 2,000 temporary auxiliary soldiers. Compared to a few days ago, they now looked like soldiers standing there. The military training made them look more upright and straight. The grievances meeting reminded them not to forget the past and to remember to strive for a better future. After eating and drinking well, each of them had a ruddy complexion. When they thought about becoming real auxiliary soldiers, they would have the opportunity to follow the auxiliary soldiers back to their headquarters and live a fair and just life without having to worry about food and drink. They became even more excited. It was as if the goal of their lives had already appeared. In order to live a happy life in the future, they had to perform well in this battle. With their fighting spirit and morale, they tightened their grip on the crossbows in their hands. Although the crossbows in their hands couldn't be compared to the auxiliary soldiers, regardless of whether it was shooting distance or accuracy, they were still much better than the rusty knives, hoes, and wooden sticks they used in the Huang bandit army. With such excellent weapons, they would definitely win this battle. The 2,300 soldiers all had their own ideas, but they were all thinking about how to fight this battle well and how to perform even more bravely. Behind them were the 900 Leng Feng and auxiliary soldiers. They stood motionless on the spot, like soldiers who had died many years ago in the Terracotta Army. There was no expression on their faces. They were waiting for an order to come out and take care of any opponents or enemies who wanted to threaten their safety. The 4,000 Ming soldiers stood on the right side of the formation. They craned their necks and waited to see the changes on the battlefield. Ma Wei and Guaning widened their eyes, as if they did not want to miss a single moment. They wanted to see how these mercenaries would perform. Behind these people were Yang Qindong's family. They sat in a few carriages. Tai Qingyi led a group of female soldiers to protect them. At the same time, there was a squad of Ling Feng who looked around vigilantly to prevent any suspicious people from approaching. In the carriages, the curtains of the 3 carriages were lifted. They were the first wife, Hu Yan, the third wife, Lady Shui, and Miss Su Monair. Even though Yang Chendong had said that there would be no mercy on the battlefield and that the scene would be a little terrifying, the 3 of them could not help but look at the battlefield out of curiosity. This was especially so for Su Monair. She knew very well what her mission was. She also knew what would happen to her once she completed her mission. Right now, she wanted to see if the person she was scheming against was worth it for her to complete her mission at the cost of her life. She wanted to see if it was worth it for her to be buried with him. Coincidentally, when Su Monair's gaze landed on Yang Chendong, the man, who had changed into a set of capable camouflage clothes, raised his right hand. Then, he placed it down gently, looking extremely elegant. Following this action, the 2,300 soldiers surged forward in an orderly manner. When the 2,300 people stepped on the same spot and spread out in a straight line, they looked like a long dragon from afar. It gave off an awe-inspiring feeling. Any object would be very spectacular and beautiful when they were in an orderly manner. It was just like the wild geese in the sky. When they were about to return, regardless of whether they were in a straight line or in a straight line, they would give off a spectacular sight, let alone a formation formed by 2,300 soldiers. Hiss! General Ma Wei, who saw this scene, gasped. He did not expect that with just over 2,000 people, once they moved in unison, they would create such a shocking force. When he was leading the Guangdong Guards, he had also undergone training in this area. However, as the military discipline was not very strict, not to mention over 2,000 people, even a casual formation of 1,000 people or a formation of 100 people would not be able to be in an orderly manner. Their steps would also not be in the same spot like they were now. Naturally, their might would be much weaker. He could not help but look at Guaning, who was riding a horse at the side. He realized that the other party was also deep in thought. This official from the Ministry of War, who had just been promoted to a 5th-rank official, was also shocked by the scene in front of him. As someone in the Ministry of War, his vision was not like Ma Wei's, who only focused on one city in Guangdong. What he was thinking about was whether this uniform formation could be used in all of the southern Ming Empire's armies. If it was possible, would their fighting strength increase? Even his own people were shocked, let alone the opponent, Cheng Yuan. He rode on a horse and held a large blade in his hand. He looked very majestic, but when he saw the enemy move and the mountain-like aura pressing down on him, for some reason, his heart could not help but beat rapidly. A feeling of fear began to spread throughout his body. This feeling of fear quickly affected the warhorse under him. It was said that animals had a sense of fear towards danger. At this time, it also seemed to have sensed the endless danger. It began to snort and its body was also twisting, as if it wanted to escape and did not want to face this terrifying pressure. Not only Cheng Yuan and his warhorse, even the 3,000 Huang bandits behind him were intimidated by this aura at this moment. Some of the more timid ones even began to walk unsteadily. From the looks of it, it was clear that they wanted to return to the city. It was as if with the city wall, they would be able to ensure their safety. Cheng Yuan also wanted to return, but when he thought about how he was going to enter the 4 heavenly kings, if he did not do anything and was scared back into the city by the enemy's aura, once this matter spread out, how would he have the face to see others? He was afraid that from now on, no one would look up to him anymore. Whether it was for his own dignity or for his future glory, he had no reason to retreat. Furthermore, who said that if the formation was orderly, their fighting strength would be strong? Could it be that the embroidered pillow was useless? Perhaps with a single charge, he would be able to mess up the formation. After all, on the battlefield, one's methods were more powerful than one's formation. Steeling his resolve to fight, Cheng Yuan raised the long saber in his hand high and shouted, "Everyone, listen to my orders. Follow me and kill our way over." If we win this battle, everyone will return to the city to drink, eat, and play. Women, kill. Men die for wealth, birds die for food. A beautiful future was right in front of them. In addition, Yuan took the lead and charged out. The 3,000 yellow bandits behind him also relied on their morale to shout and charge out. As Yuan led his troops out, the distance between the two sides quickly closed. However, one side was like a tidal wave, while the other side was like a towering boulder. It was as if no one could shake it. Visually, it gave off such a feeling. At the very least, if they really clashed, the victor would depend on whether the tidal wave was stronger or the boulder was sturdier. Charge, charge! The yellow bandits' running speed was not slow. Especially when Yuan personally led his troops to charge at the front, the people behind him seemed to have eaten a bear's heart and leopard's guts, gaining more courage and strength. In the past, when they faced the southern Ming army, they charged like this. In their view, as long as the main general was brave and the soldiers under him fought with their lives, with the advantage of numbers, this battle could still be fought and they could still win. The sounds of killing could already be heard clearly. The distance between the two sides was less than 500 meters. Facing the chaotic roars, Battalion Commander Chen Bo, who was walking at the front, had a firm expression. He was not affected by the changes in the other side and continued to take powerful steps forward. The front army did not move, so the auxiliary soldiers and temporary auxiliary soldiers at the back naturally did not change. Even though a grave expression appeared in the eyes of some people, the formation was still orderly and there was not the slightest hint of chaos. The distance between the two sides was only 300 meters. According to the Ming Dynasty's ratio of 1 foot to the present day, it was only 300 meters. The shooting range of the U-5 rifle was 45 degrees. After flying for about 4,000 meters, it began to fall. Of course, this was not the effective range. Under the effective range, as long as one could see, 800 meters was not a problem. Within 600 meters, one could easily take a person's life. Now that the distance was less than 300 meters, it was time to attack. Some of the platoon leaders and squad leaders who understood the reasoning behind this looked at Battalion Commander Chen Bo. Chapter 383. How could Chen Bo not know that they could shoot now? However, this time, he only had a company of cold vanguards. They could fight to their heart's content, but if they did that, what would happen to the auxiliary soldiers and the 2,000 auxiliary soldiers? Because their loyalty did not undergo the final test, they only had crossbows in their hands, which had a lethality of 150 meters. In other words, if Chen Bo gave the order to attack now, they would be able to heavily injure the enemy, but the auxiliary soldiers would have a hard time fighting. That was why Chen Bo did not give the order to attack immediately. He was calculating in his mind. A normal crossbow had a damage range of 120 meters and its effective range was around 100 meters. As long as he could control the range of the crossbow beyond 120 meters, he would still have the initiative. That way, more auxiliary soldiers would have a chance to perform. After some calculations, the distance between the two sides increased from 300 meters to 200 meters, then 180 meters, 170 meters. More cold vanguards started to look at the battalion commander Chen Bo, waiting for him to give the order to shoot. This was something that only the elite cold vanguards could do. Without orders from their superiors, even if the enemy was right in front of them, they could not simply shoot. Otherwise, they would be severely punished by military law. 150 meters was within the range of the auxiliary soldiers' crossbows. Chen Bo waved his right hand and the 100 cold vanguards stopped in their tracks. Release the safety and prepare to fire. Auxiliary soldiers, continue forward. Once the gunshot is heard, attack immediately. Don't give the enemy a chance to react. Finally, the order to attack was given. The 100 cold vanguards pulled the safety of their 95 shots in unison. The sound of the guns being fired was crisp and pleasing to the ear. While they were doing that, the 200 auxiliary soldiers and 2,000 auxiliary soldiers rushed out from their sides like carps crossing the river. They charged straight at the Huang bandit army. At a distance of 150 meters, the two sides were still closing in. The 500 archers in the Huang bandit army were ready to fire their arrows. General Cheng Yuan, who was leading the charge on his horse, was also ready to shout out the command to fire. 140 meters, 130 meters, crossbows ready, fire. A voice that was a step faster than Cheng Yuan's came from Chen Bo's ears. Following the order, hundreds of tongues of flame spewed out. Their targets were Cheng Yuan, who was on his horse, and the Huang bandits who were preparing to shoot. There were also 200 auxiliary soldiers working together with him. They had already aimed their crossbows at the archers. This was the group of people who posed the greatest threat to them. As long as they could take them all down, the control of the battlefield would definitely fall into their hands. At that time, they would be able to kill as they pleased. Ba ba ba, whoosh whoosh whoosh, the sound of gunfire and crossbow bolts pierced through the air almost at the same time, causing Cheng Yuan to fall off his horse, the archers to fall to the ground, and the Huang bandit army to descend into chaos. No one would have thought that the mighty General Cheng Yuan would fall off his horse without even touching the hair of his opponent. Their general was wearing armor and could not be injured by ordinary arrows, but why was he still so careless? Without a leader, the Huang bandit army appeared to be in chaos. Another junior leader wanted to take over the command of the army, but his influence was too small to make the entire army listen to his orders. Not to mention, as the second wave of gunfire and crossbow bolts rang out, the junior leader also fell to the ground with a plop. Kill. Cheng Yuan is dead. Those who resist will be killed. Those who surrender will live. Seeing the enemy's generals fall to the ground one after another, the 200 and 2,000 auxiliary soldiers charged over with a momentum that could topple mountains and overturn seas. Along the way, they were like a hot knife through butter. Every time the sound of gunfire or crossbow bolts rang out, there would be people on the other side falling to the ground. This kind of situation where they had lost 7 to 8% of their forces without even fighting caused the morale of the Huang bandit army to plummet again and again. They were originally a motley crew. Their original goal of joining the Huang bandit army was not pure. They only wanted to eat their fill and did not even know what to do after eating. How could an untrained army with no goals, no ideals, no pursuits, no beliefs be a match for the Yang family army? Even if they were facing temporary auxiliary soldiers who had vague goals in life, they would not be a match for them. With the sound of crossbow bolts piercing through the air, they did not even need to engage in close combat. They could kill their opponents from far away. Then, they would load the crossbow bolts and shoot. Every time this happened, the Huang bandit army would fall to the ground after being hit by the crossbow bolts. In this kind of near one-sided slaughter, under the situation where they had lost the support of their own archers, only death would await them if they continued to resist. At this moment, there were finally people who could not endure the fear because they did not know when they would fall. They also did not know if the next one to fall would be them. Since surrendering would allow them to live, there was no need to hesitate. Groups of people began to throw away the weapons in their hands and kneel on the ground. Good. Behind them, Yang Chendong used his binoculars to observe everything. Seeing that Cheng Yuan had fallen from his horse and the Huang bandit army was in chaos, he waved his hand and said to Luope, "You can attack the city now." Go. Yes. Luope, who had been waiting impatiently for a long time, was waiting for these words. At this moment, other than leaving a company of cold vanguards to protect Yang Chendong's central army, the other two companies of cold vanguards rushed out like war horses. Some of them were even carrying things that Guan Ning and Ma Wei did not recognize and did not know what they were for. Let's go, we can also advance. I believe that within 2 hours, we will be able to eat in Zhaoqing's residence. Yang Chendong chuckled with a face full of confidence. Yes, the mercenaries are really powerful. Guaning and Ma Wei agreed, but no matter how one listened, they seemed to be perfunctory. After all, only Cheng Yuan and the soldiers he brought out of the city were defeated. There were still 2,000 Huang bandit army defending the city. How could it be taken down so easily? One had to know that a siege would consume the most time and energy, as well as the source of soldiers. If things went wrong, a city would be surrounded for 10 days, half a month, or even longer. It would be normal for the city not to fall. No matter what Guaning and Ma Wei thought, Yang Chendong was still very confident on his horse. It was as if he was not going to watch the battle, but directly entering the city. At this moment, Luo Po was leading 2 companies of cold vanguards to rush forward. As he ran, he encouraged the cold vanguards beside him, "Everyone, hurry up. The 6th young master is right behind us. When the 6th young master arrives, the city gates will be broken. Don't delay the 6th young master's arrival." After mentioning the 6th young master 3 times, it seemed to be a little long-winded. However, to the cold vanguards, it was the most encouraging words. At least at this moment, because everyone heard the name of the 6th young master, their speed increased. Cheng Yuan's army was defeated and captured. Most of his men were either killed, injured, or surrendered. Less than 800 of them actually escaped. These people risked their lives to reach the city gates of Zhaoqing Prefecture and shouted for the city guards to lower the drawbridge. Unfortunately, the auxiliary and temporary auxiliary soldiers behind them had already caught up. The Huang bandit army in the city did not dare to open the city gates. Seeing that there was no hope of entering the city, the 800 deserters were afraid that they would be killed on the battlefield. One by one, they threw down their weapons and knelt down to surrender. Thus, the 3,000 Huang bandit army soldiers became prisoners of war. After bringing these people to the side, Battalion Commander Chen Bo led a company of cold vanguards to the city gates. "Listen up, we are the mercenaries hired by the Duke of Loyal Courage of the Great Ming Dynasty. In the Guangzhou Prefecture, the 80,000 soldiers led by Huang Yuliang were also heavily injured by us. If you know what's good for you, immediately open the city gates and you will be considered to have made a military contribution. Otherwise, you will be punished for breaching the city gates." There were many ways to persuade the enemy to open the city gates. The soft way was to tempt them with benefits and say all sorts of nice things. The hard way was to use a harsh tone and use threatening words. However, there were too few examples of people being able to persuade the enemy to open the city gates with just a few words. For example, the 2,000 Huang bandit army soldiers had no intention of opening the city gates. When Cheng Yuan fell off his horse, they noticed that something was wrong and had already sent people to the Wuzhou Prefecture to ask for help. As long as young Master Huang received the news and arrived with his troops, the crisis in Zhaoqing Prefecture would naturally be resolved. Chen Bo stood at the foot of the city gates and shouted 3 times. However, no one used words to reply to him. Instead, a few arrows were shot in front of his feet. This was because the distance was not enough. Otherwise, Chen Bo would have been injured. "You're courting death." Chen Bo felt like he had been slapped in the face when he saw a few arrows stuck in the ground 7 or 8 meters away from him. His face turned ashen. "Men, kill those who shot the arrows for me." "Yes, Battalion Commander." Among the cold vanguard, there were people who could not wait to test their skills. Now that they had Chen Bo's orders, there was no need for them to hold back. They laughed and raised their guns to shoot. A Huang bandit army soldier who was holding a bow and arrow on top of the city gate tower unfortunately became the target. Before he could pull his arms back, he heard a crisp gunshot. He was shot between his eyebrows and fell from the city gate tower. This was only the beginning. Following that, the other cold vanguard soldiers began to search for their own targets. Within the time it took for a stick of incense to burn, 9 Huang bandit army soldiers who wanted to shoot arrows were killed. They either fell from the city gate tower or died within the city gate tower. The deaths of these people shocked the Huang bandit army soldiers who were guarding the city. It also shocked the 2,000 auxiliary soldiers who were watching from the side. The battle just now had been extremely satisfying and smooth. The situation had been one-sided from beginning to end. Many of them had not felt any danger and had won the battle. However, this kind of shock was not as great as what they saw in front of them. When they saw that every Huang bandit army soldier who was exposed on top of the city gate tower would quickly fall to the ground and die, they finally understood what the cold vanguard represented. In the past, they had always heard the auxiliary soldiers talk about how powerful the cold vanguard was and did not think much of it. Now, it seemed that everything was true. It was just that their vision was too narrow and they could not imagine it. Chapter 384. Ba Daojiang was also among the auxiliary soldiers. The scene in front of him shocked him as well. As a martial artist with decent martial arts skills, he used to be very conceited. In a one-on-one fight, there were very few people who could convince him. But now, after witnessing such accurate and miraculous marksmanship, he knew that those so-called martial arts experts, when faced with such an accurate gun that could easily take a person's life from several hundred feet away, most likely would not have the slightest bit of advantage and could only be slaughtered by others. No, I have such good stuff too. As long as I am willing to put in the effort to train, I will also become a sharpshooter like this. Ba Daojiang set a goal for himself in his heart. Not only him, but many of the auxiliary soldiers also had the same idea. At this moment, they were more eager than ever to join the mercenary army. If in the past, they only wanted to fill their stomachs and fill their stomachs, now they had a higher goal. They wanted to become the strongest soldiers in the world. Under Chen Bo and Ling Feng's gunfire, the Huang bandit army suffered losses and no one dared to show their faces. At this moment, Commander Luo Po led 2 companies of Ling Feng and rushed over. "Commander, give me an hour. I will lead Ling Feng and charge into the city. We will definitely take down the city." When Chen Bo saw that Commander Luo Po had arrived, he stepped forward and volunteered. "How are we going to take down the city without scaling ladders?" "Alright, you've already done very well. Look at me now." Luo Po patted Chen Bo's shoulder. He had given Chen Bo a chance to perform well just now. Now, it should be his turn. A higher rank would be able to suppress others. Not to mention that he had just performed a meritorious deed. If it was his turn, it should be Luo Po's turn. Chen Bo immediately led the troops from before to the side. Commander Luo Po was left behind. He confidently led 200 elite Ling Feng to the city gate tower. At some point, a loudspeaker had appeared in his hand. He first glanced behind him and waited for the 200 soldiers to get into formation. When they were ready, he raised his head to look at the city gate tower and shouted, "The people on the city gate, listen up. Now that your Yuan has been captured, you are just cornered beasts. If you open the city gate now, you can still redeem yourselves. But if you wait until we reach the city gate, you will all die without a burial place. I'll give you 10 breaths of time to make your decision. Men, prepare the rocket launchers." The 200 cold vanguard soldiers had been waiting for this order for a long time. As soon as Luo Po's voice fell, 5 cold vanguard soldiers walked out from the ranks. Each of them carried a 40-0 rocket launcher on their shoulders. They raised the launchers and aimed them at the city tower. The rest of the cold vanguard soldiers held the 9.5 in their hands as they stared at the city gate tower. If anyone dared to show themselves, they would not hesitate to shoot. The 40-0 rocket launcher, commonly known as the 40-0 fire, had a diameter of 40 mm, a mass of 5.6 kilograms, a length of 910 mm, a diameter of 85 mm, a mass of 2.1 kilogram, and a firing distance of 300 m, although the 40-0 fire had a high requirement for stability when firing from a kneeling or standing position, it was still a convenient and portable siege weapon. After all, it was very powerful. As long as they had control of the battlefield, they could fire at will. After the 540-0 fire cannons were adjusted, the first cannonball rose into the air and smashed into the city tower of Zhaoqing City. Boom! A huge flame suddenly lit up. Even though it was daytime, there was still a flash of flame. When it landed on the city wall, not only did it create a huge crater, the powerful explosion also caused people's ears to ring and their hearts to palpitate, causing them to tremble in fear. With just one shell, the Huang bandit soldiers on the city gate tower trembled. They did not dare to look down from the city gate tower. Naturally, they did not know what it was that brought about such power. However, their instincts told them that this thing was very powerful and would not be easy to deal with. On the other hand, the soldiers below the city, no matter if it was the 2,000 temporary soldiers, the 4,000 Ming army soldiers, or the thousands of Huang bandit soldiers that were just captured, they were all frightened by the formation in front of them. What kind of cannon was this? How could it have such power? Moreover, it looked so small and convenient. It could really be called a godly weapon in the army. With one shell, rocks flew everywhere, causing the city gate tower to become silent. Then, a second and a third shot were fired. One of the shots hit the battlements of the city wall. Not only did it destroy a piece of the battlements, but it also sent rubble flying in all directions, injuring many of the Huang bandits who were hiding there. Still not surrendering? You only have 4 breaths of time. Luo Po looked at the results of the 40-0 fire and his eyes were filled with confidence. He dropped his hand and another rocket launcher flew onto the city wall, causing a piece of the city wall to fly away. We surrender. Don't fight anymore. We surrender. With just 4 cannonballs, the morale of the Huang bandit army on the city wall was completely crushed. They did not dare to show their faces and could not fight back. They could only wait for their deaths. This battle was very cowardly. Rather than waiting for their deaths, it was better to surrender. That way, they would be able to save their lives. As for whether young Master Huang would punish them after they lost Zhaoqing Manor, he should go find General Cheng Yuan and not these normal soldiers. With the sudden appearance of the 40-0 fire, Zhaoqing Manor gave up. Even the city gate was not affected. By the time Yang Chendong, Guaning, and General Ma Wei arrived, the city gate was already wide open. Leng Feng and the other soldiers had already entered to maintain order and capture the captives. Outside the city gate, there were only 4,000 Ming army soldiers, 100 auxiliary soldiers, and 400 temporary soldiers guarding the captives. When Ma Wei arrived and saw that none of his subordinates had entered the city, he couldn't help but ask angrily, "Why didn't you all enter the city? Why are you all guarding outside?" "General, they didn't let us in. They said that they wanted to organize the military resources in the city before letting us in." A chilly arch ran in front of Ma Wei and said with an aggrieved expression, "That's right. I'm sure General Ma knows that His Majesty did not give the mercenaries any military funds. He allowed us to take what we want first when we occupy a piece of land. General Guaning knows about this." Yang Chendong saw this scene and said with a smile. On the side, when Guaning heard Yang Chendong mention his name, he could only say with a bitter expression, "Yes, His Majesty did allow this." Seeing that Guaning and Ma Wei were unhappy, Yang Chendong knew that this was caused by the imbalance in their hearts. He immediately said, "Forget it. Let the mercenaries pick first. As for the military merits, they can all go to you. That bandit leader Cheng Yuan can also be given to you. At least, how you write the battle report is up to you. Write it as beautifully as possible. Even if all the military merits are given to you, I don't care. What do you think?" Yang Chendong made a concession. Only then did Guaning and Ma Wei's faces show some joy. If there were no military merits and no loot, then there really was no point in coming. Fortunately, they could still get some benefits. They didn't have to spend much effort or risk their lives. This was a pretty good result. After thinking this through, the two of them cupped their fists and bowed to Yang Chendong to express their gratitude. Yang Chendong made a concession and had Guaning draft the battle report for him to look over. Most of it recorded how brave and good the Ming army was in battle. Regarding this, the imperial envoy did not have any objections. Guaning and Ma Wei sent the battle report to Jianghu with the fastest speed of 800 li. A few days later, there were fast horses entering the city from Jianghu. Along the way, they shouted the Guangdong victory report and headed straight for the royal palace. When the common people passing by saw this scene, not a single one of them was not excited and encouraged. They sighed in their hearts that Yingzong was indeed the legitimate emperor. He had won battle after battle. It looked like the chaos in the south would be resolved soon. In the royal palace, Zhu Qizhen saw the battle report. Seeing that they had used less than half a day to take back Xiaoqing Manor and had killed and captured nearly 10,000 enemies, he was immediately overjoyed. He gave Guaning and Ma Wei, who had performed meritorious service, a reward and encouraged them to continue to work hard to completely destroy the yellow bandits as soon as possible. From beginning to end, Zhu Qizhen still did not mention Yang Chendong. It was as if this person did not even exist. It was as if the victory at the front had nothing to do with this Duke of Loyalty and the imperial envoy. In reality, everyone had a balance in their hearts. This victory had a lot to do with the Duke of Loyalty and courage. If not, why did they always retreat in defeat before? Could they really achieve victory after victory now? However, the emperor's heart was fickle. If he did not mention Yang Chendong's meritorious service, who would dare to? There were even some people who thought that once the yellow bandits were destroyed, would it be time to burn the bridge after crossing the river? This kind of thing had happened countless times in the history of the dynasties, where the bow was put away after the birds had flown away. Jingdo's Yingzong had won the battle and was naturally very happy. Master Huang Yuliang of Wuzhou had an ugly expression after losing Xiaoqing Manor. Thinking back to when he had led a large number of soldiers to surround and attack Xiaoqing Manor, it had taken over a dozen days. Afterwards, it was only because Xiaoqing's general, Jia Ping, was greedy for life and took the initiative to abandon the city. This gave him the opportunity to enter the city and take over the city. But now, the South Ming army had taken over the city in half a day. In comparison, didn't it seem that he was too incompetent? What do we do? What do we do? In the manor's main hall, Huang Yuliang summoned a group of leaders and asked the people below him. When things were going smoothly, these leaders would all lead the soldiers in battle and display a brave and fearless appearance. But after suffering successive defeats, when he asked who would counterattack Xiaoqing Manor, not a single person answered. It was clear that these people were all frightened and were afraid from the bottom of their hearts. Sitting high up, Huang Yuliang asked a few questions in succession. What do we do? The people below still did not answer. In a flustered and exasperated state, he wanted to call out a general. It was at this time that Zhu Fangyong, one of his trusted aides, stood out. "Young master, I have something to say." Chapter 385. Oh, are you willing to head to Xiaoqing Manor and fight with the Ming army? Finally, someone had jumped out. Huang Yuliang felt much more comforted, and his gaze toward Zhu Fangyong was filled with more hope. No. Zhu Fangyong shook his head. Seeing that Zhu Fangyong had not stepped out to help him, anger flashed across Huang Yuliang's face. Before Huang Yuliang could say anything, Zhu Fangyong had already said, "Young master, forgive me for speaking bluntly, but since Xiaoqing Manor has been taken, it will be extremely difficult to take it back. Since we are wasting soldiers on this, why not do something else?" "Something else? What do you mean?" Confusion appeared in Huang Yuliang's eyes. I am thinking that the morale of the South Ming army is at its peak. After winning 2 battles in a row, the morale of the army is at its peak. Facing this army, it is not easy for us to fight them head-on. We should think of other methods. The art of war says that the first time will weaken and the third time will be exhausted. As long as we can use the city to stop them, as time goes on, the morale of the army will be disrupted. At that time, it will be time for us to counterattack. Standing there, Zhu Fangyong spoke with a righteous expression and did not show any fear. Once he spoke, he immediately received the support of the other generals. Yes, General Zhu is right. The morale of the Ming army is at its peak, and it is not easy to fight them head-on. The people who could say such things were naturally afraid of the Ming army. Cheng Yuan's martial prowess was much higher than theirs, but he still could not defeat the Ming army. If they went, wouldn't it be the same as going to their deaths? All of the generals said such things. Huang Yuliang knew in his heart that even if he gave a death order for anyone to lead the troops, they would most likely lose and would only damage their own strength. However, he was still unwilling to just defend like this, so he asked, then, according to General Zhu, we can only wait for them to attack in Wuzhou City? Of course not. Although we can't do anything to the Ming army at the front, the other armies can take action. For example, we can send General Cui Yan, who is outside the city, to lead troops into Mengzhu Ridge, which is between Pingyuefu and Shaozhoufu. Passing through there, we can avoid fighting with the Ming army's main force and also push the battle line out. Once we enter Yongzhoufu in the Huguang area, we will be free like birds flying in the sky. We can greatly expand our army there. At that time, whether we continue to attack cities and seize land to expand our influence or bring the newly arrived troops back to Guangdong, the initiative will be in our hands. There is also General Sun Jianglong in Gaozhoufu and Lijiaofu. We can order him to launch an attack on the Guanghai guards and thus attack Guangzhoufu to divide the Ming army's strength and destroy them one by one. Also, we can arrange for General Ru Honghai in Xuanzhoufu to advance toward Nanningfu in Guangxi and also toward Liuzhoufu. There is also another benefit. Once Wuzhou City is in danger, we can retreat toward Guangxi to avoid the danger and make plans. After speaking so much, Zhu Fangyong turned to Huang Yuliang and said, "This way, we will be spreading out everywhere and forcing the Ming army to send reinforcements everywhere. At that time, our chance will come. We can gather a large number of troops to attack one place and reverse the current disadvantageous situation." Zhu Fangyong's words were clear and logical. In Huang Yuliang's ears, it was quite feasible. He was even fantasizing that once the plan came true, the power in his hands would more than double. At that time, he would be able to stand up against Yunnan's Min Zhuang Wangzhu Huiying. Then, it would not be impossible for him to conquer the world. Good, good. General Zhu's plan is good. Immediately write letters to the heavenly kings. I want to spread out everywhere on the battlefield. I want the Ming army to be tired of dealing with them. I want the world to know my power. Huang Yuliang laughed in praise. It was as if he had already become the master of the world. Congratulations, young master. The other generals in the hall also flattered him, causing waves of laughter to erupt. Fast horses left the Wuzhou house and headed in all directions. Before long, Guangdong, Guangxi, and even Huguang would become chaotic. At that time, the Ming Empire would not have the energy to send a large army to deal with the Wuzhou house. Zhaoqing House. A new round of evaluation and selection was going on. Of the 5,000 soldiers that Cheng Yuan had brought with him, 4,500 remained unscathed in this battle. They had all become captives. Among these people, there was no lack of strong and healthy people. In this aspect, one had to say that Cheng Yuan cared about his subordinates. As for their food and drink, he did not take away much. Now, these people had all become good soldiers. First, there was registration. Then, there was an investigation. There was also the process of exposing each other. Among the 2,000 people who had become temporary soldiers, some were familiar with these brothers. With their help, the evaluation went even smoother. In the end, 1,000 of the 4,500 people were chosen to become temporary soldiers. The other 3,500 people were given to Guanyin and Ma Wei as usual. Yang Chendong did not lack useless soldiers. These people would eat a lot every day. It was better to leave the headache to others. Choose and see if there are any who are willing to become soldiers. If there are, investigate their backgrounds. Guanyin discussed with Ma Wei. With the 2,000 temporary soldiers that Yang Chendong had taken in as an example, the two of them could see the importance of captives. If there were two things that they could not ignore in the Battle of Zhaoqing, it would be the appearance of the 4-0 fires and the performance of the temporary soldiers. Mercenaries were very powerful in all aspects. Guanyin and Ma Wei already had enough knowledge of this. However, the 2,000 temporary soldiers had only been in the military camp for a few days and had only gone through a few days of training. They could not understand how they could display such strong killing intent on the battlefield. Why was it that even though they had both joined the army, once they joined the mercenary group, they would change so drastically? They couldn't figure out the logic behind it, but they could at least imitate it. They just had to learn from it. As for the two generals starting to recruit soldiers from the captives, Yang Chendong only smiled when he heard the report from his subordinates. Pass down the order. Organize the new temporary auxiliary soldiers and teach them culture using the method of the old leading the new. At the same time, tell them that culture is also very important. Whether they can become a member of the mercenary army in the future, this assessment cannot be ignored. If there is any obvious improvement, consider adding 3 pieces of fatty meat to their meal. Yang Chendong was very observant. This might have something to do with the fact that he was the most outstanding member of the Cold Vanguard Special Forces in his previous life. When carrying out special missions, being more attentive and observant could save one's life during crucial moments. It was precisely because of his meticulous observation that he noticed that whenever it was time to eat, the temporary auxiliary soldiers, who rarely ate their fill, would stare at the fatty meat on the plate without blinking. Some of them would even drool without any form of restraint. Most of the time, the reward was the most important thing. In other words, the reward had to be something the other party liked and needed. For example, if you asked a rich merchant to do something for you, and you only said that you would reward him with a certain amount of silver, the effect might not be much. However, if you said that you could give him an official position after he did a good job, then it would be completely different. Perhaps the other party would do the job well even if he had to pay for it. This was what it meant to reward something. Since the temporary soldiers were so greedy for fatty meat, he would use this as a guide. When Tiger's Mane heard Yang Chendong say that he would reward the soldiers who performed well with 3 pieces of fatty meat, he was stunned. Then, he said, "Young master, Zhaoqing Prefecture was just raided by the Huang army. We did get some gold and silver when we entered the city, but meat is very rare. It would cost a lot to buy it. Why don't we just reward them with silver? You also know that meat is very rare. If that's the case, even if we gave them silver, where would they go to buy it? Okay, go tell Guanyin and General Ma Wei to help us contact pork. It would be best if there was a live pig for sale. We don't lack silver. When the live pig arrives, we can directly bring it to the barracks to stimulate those people." Yang Chendong shook his head with a smile and then said to Tiger's Mane in an unquestionable tone. Note, the so-called taboo is to avoid the name and not the surname. For example, there was a Kaiyuan county that was changed to Kaiyuan to avoid Zhu Yuanzhang's name. It was to avoid the Yuan in the name Yuanzhang. Everyone, please don't argue about whether the name pig is appropriate or not. Thank you. Since the young master had already thought of everything, Tiger's Mane didn't dare to say anything more. He agreed and left. When he found Guanning and Ma Wei because of this matter, and at the same time brought in a total of 30,000 silver taels, the two generals were really confused. However, since this matter was requested by the imperial envoy and he was willing to spend a high price to buy live pigs, how could they refuse? They immediately expressed that they would use their connections to get as many live pigs as possible. The two generals did their best on this matter. Regardless of whether it was because they wanted to curry favor with Yang Chendong or because they could profit from this matter, large amounts of live pigs were quickly sent to Zhaoqing Prefecture by the rich people in the nearby countryside. They then passed through the city and were transported to the mercenary barracks outside the city. Wang Yong was a member of the Wang family in Zhaoqing Prefecture. The Wang family had once been a large family in the city. Since he was young, he had never lacked food and clothing. He had always carried the hope of the family's revival. However, he had no interest in studying. Instead, he liked to dance with his spear and stick. He had taken many people as his master and had learned a good set of martial arts. When Zhaoqing Prefecture was surrounded by the Huang bandit army, he had been traveling with some of his Jianghu friends. After he heard the news of Zhaoqing being surrounded, he flew back. However, he was still one step too late. By the time he had secretly snuck back into the city, hundreds of people in the Wang family had all been killed by the Huang bandit army. There were also some clan sisters who had been brutally humiliated by Cheng Yuan and his trusted aides. Chapter 386. The furious Wang Yong once again used the name of the Wang clan. To outsiders, he would always use the name Wang Yong from the Wang clan. He gathered a group of brothers to assassinate small groups of Huang bandit soldiers in the city. Not to mention that his plan was meticulous and his skills were good, he actually managed to kill many Huang bandit soldiers. For a time, Cheng Yuan, who was in the city, was furious. If not for the fact that Yang Chendong and the others arrived outside the city in time and posed a threat to the Zhaoqing manor, Cheng Yuan would have started a large manhunt in the city to find Wang Yong and the others. In the end, Cheng Yuan was captured and the Zhaoqing manor returned to the arms of the southern Ming government. However, there was not a trace of joy on Wang Yong's face. This was because he had already found out that Cheng Yuan was not dead. After being injured, he was imprisoned in the southern Ming army and was waiting to be sent to the capital to be executed. Wang Yong was unwilling that he could not take revenge for his clan by himself. For this matter, he had gone to find the southern Ming soldiers and requested to meet their general. However, how could a person without any official status get what he wanted? Not willing to give up, he saw a large group of pigs heading towards the mercenary camp outside the city. He immediately thought of a plan and chased after the pig delivery team. "I know how to herd pigs. I can help you." The pig delivery team consisted of a squad of Ling Feng, a platoon of auxiliary soldiers, and 100 southern Ming soldiers. Because there were too many pigs, it was difficult for them to herd them. Now that someone was willing to help, they naturally would not refuse. Thus, Wang Yong generously joined the team. Not to mention that his skills were good and his eyes were sharp. Every time the pigs wanted to leave the team, he would be the first to discover them and herd them. This was a great help. After traveling for a few li, the mercenary camp was in front of them. Because of the appearance of these live pigs, the normally heavily guarded military camp relaxed a little. Wang Yong even followed the troops into the military camp. With so many pigs being sent into the camp, the auxiliary soldiers who were training all widened their eyes. When they learned from their instructor that these live pigs would be slaughtered very soon and that everyone would get a share, and that those who performed well would get 3 extra pieces of fatty meat with their meals, each and every one of them worked even harder to train. Even when teaching them how to read and write, they were much more serious. It had to be said that Yang Chendong's move was indeed effective. After Wang Yong followed the team and sent the pork into the temporary pig house, the platoon leader, Ling Feng, who was following the team, came forward to express his gratitude. He even took out some silver as a reward. This was also the military discipline of the Yang family army. They couldn't casually take a needle or a piece of thread from the common people. As long as there were people who helped them, they had to give a corresponding reward. Of course, Wang Yong wouldn't care about such a small amount of silver. He refused. "Sir, I want to see your general." Captain Leng Feng was stunned when he heard this. He immediately understood that the other party had come for something. He immediately smiled and said, "Brother, seeing that you have a strong body, could it be that you want to join us? If that's the case, you don't have to go see a general. There's a recruitment office not far away. You can go there and register your situation in detail." "No. I'm not here to join the army. I have something to talk to your general about." Wang Yong shook his head and said coldly. To him, the Wang family had been destroyed by the Huang bandits. He had no hope of surviving. Right now, he only wanted to kill Cheng Yuan and take revenge. After that, he would be at the mercy of others. For someone who had already thrown his life to the back of his mind, how could he have any interest in joining the army? Seeing that the other party wasn't here to join the army, the platoon leader raised his guard. He lightly raised his arm and made a warning gesture to the other members of the Leng Feng. He then smiled and walked in front of Wang Yong and said, "Brother, if you have something to tell me, it's the same. If it's really important news, I will definitely report it to our officers. Even if there's merit, I won't take it from you." As the platoon leader spoke, the other members of the Leng Feng platoon started to approach Wang Yong. Among them was Peng Yu, who had been allowed to join the Leng Feng platoon as an auxiliary soldier by Yang Chendong. Peng Yu hadn't been in the Leng Feng platoon for long, but his enthusiasm for learning was very high. He quickly learned some of the hand signals used by members of the Leng Feng platoon and was very familiar with the platoon leader's hand signals. While they were talking, he had already reached Wang Yong's side. After all, he was a martial artist. When someone suddenly approached him, Wang Yong quickly sensed it. Out of instinct, he suddenly charged at the platoon leader and struck out with his elbow. Those who could enter the Leng Feng platoon and become a platoon leader were all elites in the army. Even if their martial arts were average, they weren't easy to injure. Seeing that Wang Yong's attack was incomparably powerful, the platoon leader quickly retreated and dodged the attack. After forcing the platoon leader back with just one attack, Wang Yong quickly turned around and kicked him. Obviously, the attack just now was just a feint. His real target was the people behind him. He wanted to kill his way out before he was surrounded. Wang Yong charged in the direction of Peng Yu. Peng Yu saw the kick coming at him with a whistling sound. At this moment, his comrades didn't quickly form an encirclement. Peng Yu gritted his teeth and raised his right arm to protect his head. After that, he chose to take the attack head-on. Bang! The kick landed with a powerful force on Peng Yu's body. He couldn't help but let out a muffled sound. But then, he suddenly exerted force and pushed the kick away. Then, he quickly threw a punch at Wang Yong's chest. Peng Yu's reaction was fast and his ability to take hits was strong. This greatly exceeded Wang Yong's expectations. He originally thought that the other party was just a small soldier from the southern Ming Empire. With his methods, he wouldn't even care if there were 3 or 5 of such people. But now, not only did the other party take the attack from his kick, but he was also able to counterattack. In a moment of carelessness, his body was a little slow in dodging, and the punch landed on his ribs. Although he discovered it in time and wasn't seriously injured, he couldn't help but feel a faint pain below his ribs. After knowing that Peng Yu wasn't simple, and from the corner of his eyes, he noticed that the surrounding Ming Empire soldiers were beginning to increase. Wang Yong, who didn't dare to continue fighting, quickly retreated and rushed in another direction where there weren't many people. Wang Yong's vision was accurate, and the direction he chose to break out of the encirclement was correct. It made the platoon leaders feel like they couldn't catch up. If they let him escape from their hands like this, they didn't know how they would be laughed at by their comrades. They immediately chased after him ferociously. Ba Daojiang, who was originally a captive of the Yellow Bandits, was now a temporary auxiliary soldier. At this moment, he was sneakily approaching the pig house. Don't think that he wanted to do something bad. He just wanted to see if there was an opportunity to eat the pigs when they were slaughtering them. It would be good even if he could eat a piece of meat. Because he was thinking about the pork, he asked for leave from the platoon leader and approached the pig house with the excuse that he needed to go to the toilet. Unexpectedly, he didn't see a single pig, but he did see a few humans. When he saw the platoon leaders wearing camouflage uniforms rushing in his direction, he instinctively turned around and wanted to run. After becoming a temporary auxiliary soldier, he naturally knew the story of the platoon leaders. He knew that they were the elites of the elites, and that they had the ability to fight against 100 people by themselves with their firearms. Although he was good at martial arts, how could he fight against advanced firearms? Since he wasn't a match for them, he decided to dodge. He was probably wearing a normal military uniform. Based on his appearance and not his face, no one should know who he was. Now that he saw the platoon leaders rushing in his direction, he naturally turned around and ran. But just as he turned around, he heard a shout behind him. "My comrade, quickly turn around and stop this spy." "Spy? I'm not." When Ba Daojiang heard that he was mistaken for a spy, he quickly shook his head to deny it. In order to clear his name, he turned around and waved his hands. "I'm just greedy for pork and wanted to take advantage of it. I don't have any other intentions. Don't accuse me of anything." Before Wang Yong could finish his sentence, a punch came flying toward his face. Ba Daojiang was standing right in Wang Yong's way. In order to escape, Ba Daojiang had no choice but to take action to clear the obstacle. Who was Ba Daojiang? He was a man of 8 feet, a famous man in the martial arts world. He was a man who once chased his enemy across 8 rivers. How could he allow others to slander him so easily? He was naturally afraid of Ling Feng, but he couldn't let Ling Feng teach him a lesson without even giving him a chance to explain. This was also because he had only been a temporary auxiliary soldier for a short time, so he didn't pay much attention to military discipline. Otherwise, he wouldn't have the courage to fight back. It was precisely because the military discipline was still a little loose that when he saw someone about to attack him, he didn't hesitate to fight back. In the face of Wang Yong's punch, he didn't dodge and met it with his right fist, letting the 2 fists collide in mid-air. Clang! When the fists collided, blood flowed out from the cracks between their bones. It was obvious that both of them had used a lot of strength in their fists. When the fists collided, Wang Yong's footsteps were blocked and he was forced to take a step back. Ba Daojiang, who attacked later, was at a disadvantage. Before he could fully unleash his strength, his fists collided with Wang Yong's and he was forced to take a step back. After both of them took a step back, their eyes were filled with killing intent when they looked at each other. It was as if they were saying, "Brat, you dare to attack me? You're dead meat." Their gazes met for only a moment. Then, without allowing anyone to say anything, the 2 of them began to exchange blows and fight, turning into a ball of fists and feet. Chapter 387. By the time Peng Yu and Ling Feng arrived, the 2 of them were already covered in wounds and were panting heavily. Both of them wanted to finish off the other in a short period of time, so they used all their strength. In the end, they were evenly matched, and no one gained much advantage. At this moment, the 2 of them were surrounded by Ling Feng's men. Wang Yong, who knew that he couldn't escape, cupped his fists towards Ba Daojiang. "Your kung fu is not bad, and you're fine after taking a kick from me. It's admirable." Wang Yong pointed at Ba Daojiang and Peng Yu, looking like a hero who was teaching others kung fu. "Humph. I haven't fully displayed my abilities yet. Let's fight another 100 rounds, then we'll know who's stronger." Ba Daojiang was obviously unconvinced. In fact, he didn't suffer any losses. He looked a little battered, but they were all superficial wounds. Just like the wounds he inflicted on Wang Yong, most of them were superficial wounds. Yes, you're not that strong. Just now, you were just careless. Let's fight again. I don't think you can beat me. Peng Yu also lost his temper. He walked out from Ling Feng's team and came to Wang Yong and Ba Dao Zhang's side. The three of them stood in a triangular position. The three of them were not united. They were wary of each other and looking for flaws in the other two. No one had the intention to make the first move. At this moment, several people came from afar. The leader was Yang Chendong, who was wearing a camouflage uniform without any military rank. Speaking of military ranks, Yang Chendong was a little depressed. He could wear the rank of marshal, but his regiment commander, Luopa, was only a lieutenant colonel. If he wore that rank, the gap between the two of them would be too big. Even so, it was better not to wear anything during normal times. On the contrary, it would give him a sense of mystery. Yang Chendong came here to check on the situation of the pigs. Coincidentally, he received a warning. Tiger's Mane, Beta Persei, and the captain of the first guard team, Chiu Vi, and the others rushed over together. With the arrival of Yang Chendong, Wang Yong's escape route was completely sealed. Seeing that more and more people were arriving, he instead calmed down. Since he couldn't escape, then he wouldn't escape. It was just a pity that he couldn't personally avenge the Wang clan. Come on, do you want to come at me together or one by one? Grandpa will keep you company. Since he couldn't escape, Wang Yong simply let go of his worries and assumed a posture of wanting to have a good fight. 6. Seeing that Yang Chendong had arrived, class monitor Leng Feng was nervous and wanted to say something. Yang Chendong waved his hand first, then looked at everything in front of him with a smile and said, "What? Aren't you afraid of death? Die? Who wasn't afraid? But as a real man, there are things that he should do and things that he shouldn't do. He can't back down from what he should do, and he can't shirk the responsibilities that he should bear. At most, he'll be a good man again after 18 years. Wang Yong didn't know Yang Chendong's identity, so naturally, he didn't have any scruples when he spoke. Peng Yu, who was standing beside him, knew everything. When he saw that Wang Yong dared to talk back to the sixth young master, he said angrily, "Kid, be more polite when you speak. Don't cause trouble and end up losing your life here." When Peng Yu said this, he more or less warned Wang Yong. From this point, it could be seen that he personally admired Wang Yong. However, he didn't know the details of Wang Yong, so he didn't dare to say anything. Lose my life? Huh. After hearing this, Wang Yong looked up to the sky and laughed heartily, as if he had heard the funniest joke in the world. After laughing a few times, he stopped and said, "What's wrong? It's already like this, will you spare my life? What's wrong? Even if we must kill you? Did you really do something shameful?" Yang Chendong asked curiously, as if he was interested. Something shameful? Wang Yong was provoked by this question, and his face immediately turned red. Who said I did something shameful? I came here to see your general and have something to say. How is it shameful? After hearing Wang Yong's explanation, Yang Chendong was also stunned. Then, his gaze fell on Ling Feng, who was wearing the rank of a first-class sergeant. What happened? 6th. Chief, it's like this. We were leading a team to herd pigs and passed by Zhaoqing City. This person followed us and said that he knew how to herd pigs and was willing to help us. Considering that we didn't have enough manpower, we agreed. At first, I thought that since he helped us, we should give him some money. However, he didn't want it and said that he wanted to see the general. When I asked him what happened, he wanted to run away. Then, I wanted to capture him and interrogate him. Then, we started fighting. After Ling Feng finished speaking, he lowered his head as if he had done something wrong. Yes, you didn't do anything wrong after that. However, it was wrong to allow an outsider into the military camp without permission. How about this, when you go back, find your platoon leader to write a reflection. Tonight, you will reflect on it at the company meeting. In addition, your pay will be penalized for a month. Do you have any objections? Yang Chendong said seriously. No objections, Chief. When Ling Feng heard such a punishment, he didn't dare to have any objections. He straightened his back and said, "Good." He nodded at Ling Feng, then his gaze fell on Wang Yong. If all of this is true, why did you suddenly attack these soldiers? Do you know that this can easily cause misunderstandings? Even if we kill you here, it will be your fault. Yang Chendong's tone carried an unquestionable aura. For some reason, after hearing this, Wang Yong felt that he was in the wrong. Who knows what they will do after capturing me? Will they really kill me? Speaking of which, didn't the Ming army do many similar things in the past? Wang Yong complained and couldn't even be considered an explanation. However, when Yang Chendong heard this, he couldn't defend himself. He knew that the people he brought were the new soldiers of the Yang family. However, in the eyes of outsiders, weren't they the South Ming army? It was no wonder that they had such prejudices against him. If it was him, he wouldn't have allowed himself to be captured. Thinking of this, he really couldn't blame Wang Yong. However, no matter what, Wang Yong had barged into the military camp and attacked the Ling Feng soldiers. If he wasn't punished, he wouldn't be able to answer to the other Ling Feng soldiers. Yang Chendong's face darkened and he said angrily, "No matter what, you barged into the military camp. Since you've trespassed into the military camp, it's impossible not to punish you. How about this, I'll give you a chance. The three of you will fight each other. If you can survive until the end, I'll fulfill your request and bring you to see the general here. How about that?" The three people Yang Chendong was referring to were Wang Yong, Ba Daojiang, and Peng Yu. Wang Yong originally thought that the other party had the advantage in numbers, and he had made a mistake in the first place. This time, he would definitely die. He didn't expect the situation to turn around. Immediately, he asked Yang Chendong with joy, "Is what you said just now true?" "It's true. No one here is more trustworthy than me," Yang Chendong promised Wang Yong. Then, his gaze landed on Peng Yu and Ba Daojiang. "The two of you have to perform well. Whoever can survive until the end will be promoted. Peng Yu, you can be promoted to the vice squad leader of the Ling Feng soldiers." "What's your name?" Replying to the chief, "My name is Ba Daojiang. I'm a temporary auxiliary soldier." Ba Daojiang replied. He had seen Yang Chendong before and knew that the entire army had to listen to this person's orders. When the platoon leader who was in charge of his temporary auxiliary soldiers saw this person, he didn't even have the chance to get close to him. It seemed like this person's status wasn't low. When he spoke, there was a hint of respect in his tone. "Looking at your clothes, I can tell that you're a temporary auxiliary soldier. Just now, they said that you were passing by because you wanted to get some pig offal. Alright, as long as you can survive until the end, I'll allow you to eat to your heart's content tonight. You can even eat half a pig. At the same time, I'll promote you to a real auxiliary soldier. How about that?" When Yang Chendong heard Ling Feng mention the reason why Ba Daojiang was here, he wanted to laugh. It seemed like his decision to get some pork was the right one. When he heard that he could eat to his heart's content, Ba Daojiang's eyes shone with excitement. "Chief, I'm afraid that half a pig won't be enough for me." "It doesn't matter. If you can eat, I'll give you the whole pig." Yang Chendong smiled. He was surprised by Ba Daojiang's appetite. However, since he had already said it, there was no way he would go back on his words. "Alright, I'll definitely perform well." Seeing that Yang Chendong agreed so readily, Ba Dao Jiang turned to look at Wang Yong and Peng Yu with a serious expression. It was obvious that he was serious about this. The three of them had their own targets. Naturally, it was time for them to get serious. The three of them stood in a triangular formation. First, they cupped their fists and reported their names. Peng Yu. Ba Dao Jiang. Wang family's Wang Yong. According to the rules of Jianghu, after the three of them reported their names, they began to attack fiercely and crazily. Wang Yong was good at kicking, straight kicks, side kicks, and leaping kicks. He could only see the shadows of his kicks everywhere, which was really a bit like the Foshan shadowless kick. Ba Dao Jiang Yi Quan was good at straight punches, hook punches, swing punches, and punches to the flesh. Every punch carried the sound of the wind, and the momentum was oppressive. Peng Yu was flexible and good at elbow skills. His body was like a loach that constantly swam around the two people. Whenever the punches and kicks were about to hit him, his figure often flashed and changed his position. Occasionally, his elbow counterattack was also oppressive. Once they were hit, they often cried out in pain. Is this the so-called kung fu? Yang Chendong looked at the exciting scene of the three of them fighting with his hands behind his back. He could not help but ask Beta Persei, who was beside him. Young master, this is kung fu. I can see that the three of them have learned it seriously. They have a good foundation. Beta Persei stared at the scene without blinking. He did not want to miss a single scene. Chapter 388. Beta Persei's strength lay in his height and strong body, as well as his ability to withstand blows. Often, when someone gave him 3 punches, the power of his one punch would be greater. However, it was precisely because he was too tall that he was not suitable for practicing martial arts. He had only learned a few moves from the two captains, Qiu Vi and Dao Shao. However, because he was strong enough, he felt endless power when he used them. Looking at Beta Persei's learning face, Yang Chendong knew that he would not be able to get anything out of him. He pointed at the captain of the first guard team, Qiu Vi, and said, "Captain Qiu, tell me, which one of the 3 is stronger?" It was easy to tell if an expert was skilled or not. As someone who had also practiced martial arts and had a good foundation, Qiu Vi naturally had a lot of professional considerations when judging. Seeing that Yang Chendong had called him, he took a few steps forward and said, "Young master, the 3 of them have their own strengths, but Peng Yu seems to be better at guerrilla warfare. He's not suitable for this kind of face-to-face combat." "Oh? You mean to say that Peng Yu will be the first to be defeated?" Yang Chendong asked with interest. "Not necessarily." Qiu Vi shook his head. "Peng Yu is too agile. It's not easy to hurt him. On the contrary, if you're careless and get hit by his elbow, you might have to pay a big price." "What do you mean?" Yang Chendong was a little confused. "Young master, I don't mean anything. I just want to say that the 3 of them have their own strengths. If you want to determine the winner, I'm afraid it'll be very difficult. However, the 3 of them are undoubtedly talents. If possible, young master, please allow them to be transferred to the first guard team. This will play an absolute role in better protecting the young master," Qiu Vi said while quietly paying attention to Yang Chendong's reaction. Since entering the battlefield, Chou Wu had requested to increase the number of guards in the squad. After all, there were only 10 of them. Once they encountered danger, no one could guarantee their safety. This matter was also approved by Yang Chendong. A gentleman would not stand under a collapsing wall. He still understood this principle. When he heard that Qiu Vi wanted to take the opportunity to ask for him, he was stunned for a moment before he burst into laughter. "You're good, Qiu Vi. Are you waiting for this, young master? Fine, since that's the case, I'll see what they think later. If they're willing, I can take them in. But as usual, I still have to investigate their identities. Of course, if they don't want to, we can't force them. Yang Chendong's words meant that he agreed. Just like the investigation of identity, this was originally a very important matter. Protecting Yang Chendong's safety was the most important issue in the entire Yang family army. Of course, they couldn't be careless, and they couldn't allow unreliable people to exist. As for whether they were willing to stay by Yang Chendong's side as guards, no one would be able to resist such a temptation. The three of them were still fighting, and had already lasted for an incense stick's worth of time. It could be seen that the three of them were sweating profusely, and their breathing was unstable. This kind of fight was the most exhausting. After all, the difference in strength was so great that it was possible to make a big mistake if one wasn't careful. This kind of physical strength and mental strength required a high degree of concentration, and it was also the most exhausting. The three of them were still fighting, but Peng Yu's mental strength was slightly better. From the start of the battle until now, the number of times he attacked was not many. He relied on his nimble movements to dodge, which allowed him to maintain enough physical strength. At least compared to the other two who were sweating profusely, his situation was much better. It was precisely because Peng Yu's condition was the best that when he was hit by Ba Dao River's punch, he hurriedly retreated 4 or 5 steps, then fell to the ground with a plop. This caused everyone, including Yang Chendong, to be puzzled. After being hit to the ground, Peng Yu's mental strength seemed to have completely dissipated at this moment. I lost. How is that possible? He was in good condition just now. Qiu Vi was the first to voice his doubts. What's going on? He clearly could have dodged that punch. Beta Persei also voiced his opinion. Tiger's Mane, who was standing at the side, didn't say anything. He only glanced at the sixth young master from the corner of his eyes and saw that Yang Chendong's expression remained the same, and even had a smile on his face. He was even more certain that something had happened, and immediately remained silent with a smile in his eyes. Peng Yu left the field first, and the next two people to fight was Ba Dao River and Wang Yong. However, Ba Dao River, who had sent Peng Yu flying with a punch, was obviously not in his best condition. As the user of that punch, Ba Dao River was the clearest about the power of that punch. That punch wasn't something that he had been preparing for a long time. It was just a casual punch, and it was just to prevent Peng Yu from getting close to him. Regardless of whether he could hit him, even if he could, it would at most cause a slight injury to his opponent. It was impossible to cause such serious consequences. If it was really possible, Peng Yu would have been kicked out of the ring long ago and wouldn't have lasted for so long. However, it still caused such a consequence. What exactly was going on? Ba Dao River was thinking, which slowed down his movements. After being kicked by Wang Yong a few times, his footsteps began to become a little messy. It was precisely because of this that he seemed to have figured out something in an instant. When Wang Yong's next kick arrived, he intentionally let his guard down and took the kick head-on. After being kicked, his whole body was sent flying, and he fell to the ground more than 3 meters away. Huff, huff, huff. Wang Yong, who was panting heavily, started to lose his balance. Kicking was the most exhausting move. The reason he was able to persevere until now was because of his strong desire for revenge. Otherwise, he would have been the first one to collapse from the exhaustion of his stamina. I won. After turning around to face Yang Chendong, Wang Yong, who had finished speaking, suddenly lost his balance and was about to fall to the ground. Fortunately, Qiu Vi, who was standing at the side, reacted quickly and rushed forward to support the falling figure. You all did well. How about this? Arrange for them to rest, take a bath, get some food, change their clothes, and come see me again. Yang Chendong nodded lightly, and after making the arrangements, he turned around and left. Peng Yu, Ba Dao Jiang, and Wang Yong were carried away by the Lengfeng soldiers. First, they had a comfortable hot bath. Next, they had enough meat. After that, they were given new clothes to change into. Ba Daojiang was very satisfied with all these arrangements. He, that chief is a man of his word. Even though I lost, he still prepared so much meat for me. How satisfying, he said with satisfaction as he tore the pig trotter in his hand. Peng Yu also wolfed down the food. After becoming a Leng Feng soldier, the standard of food was naturally better than normal auxiliary soldiers and temporary auxiliary soldiers. However, after that fight, he had exhausted a lot of his stamina, and now was the time to replenish his nutrients. On the other hand, Wang Yong did not speak while eating. He seemed to be thinking about whether he would be able to meet the general here and whether he could avenge his family. After the meal, Qiu Vi appeared. He looked at the three of them and said, "Let's go. The chief wants to see you." In the largest tent in the Yang family army, Yang Chendong had just finished his dinner when Qiu Vi walked in with the three of them. As soon as they entered the tent, Peng Yu knelt on the ground. "Greetings, sixth young master. I am Peng Yu." Yang Chendong smiled and nodded. "Greetings, sixth young master." Ba Daojiang hesitated for a moment before kneeling on the ground as well. With his personality, there were not many people who could make him kneel on both knees. However, just now, the other party had fulfilled his promise. He had eaten more than half a pig's head and 2 more pig trotters. Based on the other party's promise, it was not wrong for him to kneel on the ground once. After the two of them knelt, only Wang Yong was left. He raised his head and looked at Yang Chendong. "Sixth young master, right? Since I won the competition, can I meet the general here?" "How dare you? Why aren't you kneeling when you see the sixth young master?" Tiger's Mane and Beta Persei saw that Wang Yong did not kneel and even dared to question the young master. They were not going to be polite and immediately shouted at him. Qiu Vi and Dao Shao, the captain of the second guard squad, were even more direct. They came to Wang Yong's left and right side. It looked like they were going to force him to kneel. "Humph. I knew you guys wouldn't keep your word." Seeing that more people were about to surround him, Wang Yong coldly snorted. Then, he spun his body and kicked Chou Wu and Dao Shao with his 2 legs in a spinning manner. "Kid, come down." Facing this kick, the 2 guard captains were not anxious at all. They stretched out their arms at the same time and caught him firmly. Wang Yong was caught off guard and fell to the ground with a thud. This was the first time in all these years that his legs had been restrained by someone in a single move. Perhaps it was because he was careless, or perhaps it was because he had not fully recovered from the previous battle. However, it was more proof of Qiu Vi and Dao Zhao's strength. If it were anyone else, they would not have been able to do this even if they tried their best. With a plop, he fell to the ground. His new clothes were also dirty. Even his face was covered in dust. However, this did not make Wang Yong yield. He raised his head and asked Yang Chendong in a questioning tone. "You didn't keep your word. How did the young master not keep his word?" Yang Chendong had a calm smile on his face. He waved his hand casually and Qiu Vi and Dao Shao released their hands, allowing Wang Yong to regain his freedom. After regaining his freedom, Wang Yong stood up and said angrily, "You said that if I won, you would bring me to see the general here." "That's right, I already let you see him." Yang Chendong interrupted him with a smile. "See him? Where?" Wang Yong looked around suspiciously but did not find anyone who looked like a general. Chapter 389. They're everywhere. Yang Chendong chuckled and leaned back in his chair. Then, he pointed at Tiger's Mane, Beta Persei, Qiu Vi, and Dao Shao and said, "They're all generals, and they're generals who can lead thousands of troops in the future. It's just that you don't know them." "This. Are you kidding me?" As if he had just reacted, Wang Yong's gaze swept across these people, and he spoke with an even angrier voice. No one is kidding you, and you're not worthy of our teasing. Alright, since you want to see the general, you must have something to say. Just say it now. You don't have to worry about whether or not he's a general. The most important thing is that we can help you with your matter, don't you think so? Yang Qindong asked gently, and his gaze towards Wang Yong carried a hint of a soul-stirring aura. As if his thoughts were seen through, or as if he knew that there was nothing else he could do, he simply said, "All right, if that's the case, I'll say it. I want to see the general here because I'm Wang Yong of the Wang family, and I've lived in Zhaoqing Prefecture for a long time. However, because of the appearance of the Huang bandit army, especially Cheng Yuan, who coveted my Wang family's wealth and beauty, he actually destroyed my Wang family. Now that I heard that he was captured by you, I want to see him and personally avenge my family's destruction. That's all." After finally stating his request, Wang Yong felt a lot more relaxed. When he looked at Yang Qindong, he actually felt a sense of relief. "Alright, now you can take me to see the general here, or you can chase me out. Of course, you can also kill me. It's up to you." After hearing Wang Yong's request, Yang Qindong's gaze froze, then he looked at Tiger's Mane. Tiger's Mane immediately understood what Yang Qindong meant. He nodded lightly, then turned around and walked out of the tent. Obviously, he wanted to investigate the truth of this matter. After Tiger's Mane left, Yang Qindong looked at Wang Yong and said, "We won't kill you. As long as what you said is true, this young master will allow you to take revenge. Don't be impatient." After speaking to Wang Yong, Yang Qindong looked at Peng Yu and Ba Dao Jiang and said, "The two of you have good martial arts and kind hearts. You know how to help others. Am I right, young master?" "Ah." Peng Yu was stunned for a moment before he said guiltily, "Sixth young master. You saw through it?" "Huh, you saw through it." Ba Dao Jiang scratched his head embarrassedly. He had only joined for a short time, so he didn't know what the title, Sixth Young Master, meant. However, when he saw that Peng Yu, a member of Ling Feng, respected Yang Qindong so much, he didn't dare to look down on him. "Of course I saw through it. Otherwise, it would be hard to tell who would win. However, since you are helping him, I won't hold it against you. Stand up first," Yang Qindong said to the two of them with a smile. Peng Yu and Ba Dao Jiang stood up embarrassedly. Yang Qindong suddenly said, "By the way, this young master wants you to stay by my side and become my guards. Are you willing to join the first guard team?" "Ah." Peng Yu had just stood up, but when he heard this, he was shocked. When he saw the serious expression on Yang Qindong's face, he knew that it was true. He immediately knelt on the ground again. "Peng Yu is willing, Peng Yu is willing." After he finished speaking, Peng Yu didn't forget to pull Ba Dao Jiang who had just stood up. "Quick, kneel down and thank him." "Why do I have to kneel down when I just got up? Is it so awesome to join the guard team?" Ba Dao Jiang was puzzled. "Of course it's awesome. It's so awesome." Peng Yu had already joined Ling Feng, so he naturally knew that being able to protect the sixth young master was an unparalleled honor and glory. However, when he saw that Ba Dao Jiang didn't seem to care about his good intentions, he couldn't help but say, "If you join the guard team, you'll have plenty of meat." "Oh? That's not bad." Ba Dao Jiang, who seemed to be a glutton, was finally moved. Perhaps it was due to the fear of being hungry all the time, but when he heard that there would be plenty of meat, he also knelt on the ground. Both of them knelt down and chose to join the guard team. No matter what their motives were, as long as they agreed, they probably wouldn't want to leave after they learned more about it. Yang Qindong smiled in satisfaction. "Very good. In a while, follow Captain Qiu V out to change your clothes. Someone will teach you the rules you need to follow." "Yes." Peng Yu and Ba Dao Jiang agreed. At this moment, Tiger's Mane rushed back. After entering the tent, he went to Yang Qindong's side and whispered something. With the Security Bureau's current efficiency, since they had arrived at Zhaoqing Prefecture, they naturally had to investigate the surrounding situation thoroughly. The Wang family's matters were already recorded, so they would know the truth once they checked. The authenticity of Wang Yong's identity would naturally be revealed. Bring him in. After listening to Tiger's Mane's report, Yang Chendong knew that Wang Yong's name was indeed there, but he wasn't the person in front of him. The Security Bureau found someone from Zhaoqing Prefecture who knew Wang Yong, so he nodded and agreed to bring him in. Tiger's Mane agreed and clapped his hands twice. Immediately, the tent door opened from the outside and an old man in coarse clothes walked in. Once he entered the tent, he knelt on the ground. "Your humble servant Lu Sen greets the masters." The old man obviously hadn't seen much of the world, so he trembled the moment he entered the tent. As soon as he entered the tent, Wang Yong's eyes widened. "Old Lu, why are you here?" "Ah." Hearing this familiar voice, Lu San raised his head and was startled when he saw Wang Yong. He then said, "Young Master Wang, why are you here? Wasn't the entire Wang family killed by the yellow bandits?" I wasn't at home at the time, so I avoided disaster," Wang Yong said with tears streaming down his face. Lu San was someone from the same street as them, so he was a neighbor who had watched him grow up. Of course, they knew each other. With Lu San as a witness, Wang Yong's identity couldn't be faked. Yang Chendong nodded at Tiger's Mane and Lu San was brought out. The tent quickly became quiet again. "Let's go and find Sheng Yuan." Yang Chendong got up and left. Beta Persei and the others followed him out of the tent. When they walked to Wang Yong, who was still standing there, the captain of the first guard team, Chiu Vi, reached out and pulled him. "Let's go and avenge you." "Ah." Wang Yong was still in a confused state when he was pulled out of the tent. In Wang Yong's eyes, Yang Chendong was so young, even younger than himself. How could such a person be a general? Even if he relied on his family to get an official position, he probably wouldn't have any real position. In his impression, the officials of the Great Ming Dynasty were mostly old men, and the worst were middle-aged men. Could this young man do it? Wang Yong was still thinking about whether or not he could. In the military camp, Battalion Commander Chen Bo had already gathered a company of cold vanguard soldiers and followed Yang Chendong out of the military camp. Wang Yong vaguely heard someone say something. "Commander Luo, the military camp should be loose on the outside and tight on the inside. If anything happens, act accordingly." Yang Chendong wanted to capture Cheng Yuan and hand him over to Wang Yong to execute him on the spot. The idea was good, but the method was indeed against the rules. Since the person had already been handed over, the battle report to be sent to the capital should have already been written. If that was the case, then no matter what he did now, it would be considered a private action and a form of provocation. In the face of provocation, no matter what Guaning and Ma Wei did in response, it wouldn't be considered excessive. Yang Chendong was very clear on this point. It was because he was clear that he needed to make certain preparations. Although he didn't think that the other party would fall out with him because of this matter, it was better to be prepared. The mighty group of more than 100 people walked out of the military camp. Soon after, the mercenary camp closed. As for what would happen inside, outsiders probably wouldn't know. Riding tall horses, Yang Chendong and his group arrived at Zhaoqing City. Because the sky was already dark, the city gates were tightly shut. Only a few southern Ming soldiers holding torches could be seen. When they saw a group of people approaching from a distance, the soldiers guarding the city became nervous. While they were still far away, they had already drawn their bows and were ready to shoot at any moment. It wasn't until the group got closer and the uniforms of the mercenaries appeared in front of them that the soldiers guarding the city finally relaxed. However, they still didn't open the city gates. Instead, they asked in a loud voice, "May I ask what the mercenary brothers are doing here? Please open the city gates." The Imperial Envoy has important matters to attend to. Battalion Commander Chen Bo, who was in charge of calling the city gates, said as he raised the king's command banner in his hand that represented the Imperial Envoy. This was the Imperial Envoy token that the Minister of War, Kuang Yi, had given to Yang Chendong on behalf of Ingzong. The Imperial Envoy represented the Emperor on an inspection tour. When they were outside, they naturally had a powerful side. This king's command banner was a symbol. When the king's command banner appeared, the Baihu guarding the city saw it and quickly bowed respectfully. They all said, "Long live the Emperor." However, although they spoke beautifully, they still had no intention of opening the city gates. "I am truly sorry. It is already late. If the Imperial Envoy has important matters, please enter the city early tomorrow morning." "What if I insist on entering the city? If you stop me, what if something happens? Can you take the blame?" Yang Chendong appeared on horseback under the light of a torch. When his dignified gaze swept over the city gate tower, the southern Ming Baihu felt a chill from head to toe. He couldn't help but tremble all over. After experiencing 2 battles, the Imperial Envoy's name was like a killing god in the hearts of the southern Ming soldiers who followed him. If it was just a name to scare people, perhaps they could use the reason that it was too dark to refuse. However, when the real person appeared, all excuses were clearly weak. "So it is the Imperial Envoy who has personally come. I will open the gates, open the gates. Come, open the gates." You're tuning in to the Unparalleled SwordWill YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.